Yes, I have the list. All right. Now, I don't know if they told you or not, but when all of the groups that came to receive their awards from the wonderful Christmas parade we have, it's mandatory that you stay to the very end of the meeting. So don't think you're just going to get your plaque and get out of here. We're going to make you stay. Thankfully, I'm just kidding. I don't think we have a pastor tonight, so if we do have a pastor. I didn't look back in the crowd or I would have recognized. Go ahead, Pastor, lead us if everyone would stand.
For unto us a child was born, and unto us a child was given. And his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And we come to you now on behalf of the nation, on behalf of the world, Lord, as we definitely need that peace that comes through you. And Lord, we thank you for these men and women here in this city, Lord, and we just pray that they can work together in unity and one accord for the good of the people, for the best. And Lord, we just ask you have grace upon this nation, for Lord, it is divided right now. So Lord, we come humbly asking this and thanking you so much for this time of the year, for what you did for us, for your grace and your mercy. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, up first tonight is our agenda approval. Is there any changes? Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, sir. I'd like to pull 6F for discussion.
All right, I got a motion.
That's just pulled. No need for a motion.
Okay, just pulling it for discussion.
And I'd like to pull
6.
6E. I've been informed by the staff that they'd like to do some further engineering study on this before they present it to us.
Okay, so we're pulling 6F
For discussion.
for discussion. What was the other one there? And 6E, and you just want to pull that completely? All right, it's not ready.
Mayor, if I could
Go ahead, sir.
If I could add under my name, under 7F, just a brief discussion about the Gulf Power Project Manager.
Absolutely. Are those the only changes tonight?
Mayor, I'd like to pull a 5D for discussion, please.
5D, pull it for discussion?
Yes, sir.
Is that
Well,
6D?
Are you talking about 6D
It's
or 5D? 5D is a public hearing, so.
Okay.
So we're going to discuss that plenty.
okay. Thank you.
So is it 5D, sir, or 5D? Okay, all right, we'll just leave that alone then. Clear this up here real quick. All right,
Mayor, I make a motion to adopt the agenda with those aforementioned changes.
I got a motion, I
Second.
got a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Ayes have it, so moved, so noted. All righty. Next up, approval of the minutes. Item 1A, approval of minutes December 9th, 2019, special
Motion
city
to
council meeting.
approve.
Second.
Got a motion, I got a second. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved. Item 1B, approval of the minutes of September 16th, 2019, regular city council
Motion
meeting.
to approve.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion on this matter? All right, seeing none? Vote unanimous, so moved. And lastly, the approval of the minutes of September 4th, 2019, regular city council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved. Next up is our proclamations, recognitions, special presentations. 2A, Employee of the Year Award. I've been dreading this all day because I know I am not going to be able to pronounce this young man's name very well, but I'm going to do my best. Employee of the Year Award. Each year, an Employee of the Year is nominated and selected by coworkers to celebrate qualities that inspire us to achieve the city's mission. We are an organization that strives to provide a healthy, safe quality of life, balancing the needs of our residents with the expectation of our visitors and providing open, clear, accurate communication. The 2019 Employee of the Year Award has become a tradition. It is in its 29th year. It's a pleasure to honor Namadi, and I'm going to pass on your last name. She said I could just call you D. Of the Parks and Recreation Department as the 2019 Employee of the Year. Please come forward. Get your plaque. There you go. There you go, sir. Would you like to say anything? You good? He passed on talking in front of the crowd. Dee began working with the city late January 2017 with the Parks and Recreation Department as a park maintenance technician. He's responsible for performing routine maintenance of parks, facilities, walkovers. Give me more pages. He also performs minor carpentry, masonry projects, and repairs, including boat ramps and docks. Additionally, he prepares athletic fields for practices, games, tournaments, and special events, just to name a few. His co-workers identified these core values with our 2019 Employee of the Year: transparency, teamwork, integrity, professionalism, and stewardship. It's in those dedicated casts that have brought him to this point. There's a few things that some of his co-workers have written about him. He's an outstanding employee and a very kind person. He understands all aspects of duties required at the Morgan Sports Complex. Consistently hardworking, caring, and helpful to individuals, and a team player 100%. And he works harmoniously with the public and shows respect for equipment, his job, and fellow co-workers. So on behalf of our citizens, not only did he get a plaque, but he also gets a cash certificate and his etched plaque that you'll be able to keep on your desk. Again, congratulations, sir. Thank you very much for your service to our city. Now for the important part. The 2019 winners of the 35th Annual Destin Christmas Parade, Santa's Workshop. Now, we started first, and we went all the way through the parade, and thanks to Ray, we did not run out of candy to hand to the kids. But when I got back, all the way back to the in front of Pepito's, where our golf carts were supposed to be, I saw the last fire truck with Santa Claus leaving. And it just impressed me on how much participation that we had this year in the Christmas parade. And by looking at the faces that I handed out candy to and said hello to, I know that it was enjoyed tremendously by the people that attended. And I want to thank all of you, not only because you won an award, but the fact that you took the time to participate in the parade. And I know it brought joy to others, but I hope, like me, it brought joy to you as well, because it was a lot of fun. So we'll start with the individual awards. The Noel Award, which is the band award and sponsored by Destin Rotary, is Fort Walton Beach High School and Destin Middle School bands. Anyone there for them? The Elf Award, that's rascally rabbit. The children's service sponsor is by Jim Louifowl State Farm. And the winner there is Food for Thought. Are they here? Not here. The Santa's Helper Award, the children's commercial, is sponsored by AJ's Seafood and Oyster Bar, is the Rise Dance Center. Are they here? All right. Unfortunately, the bad part about being at the front of the praise, we didn't get to see him dance. There you go. Get all the little ones. Get them all in? Okay. All right. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. There you go. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Congratulations. The Civic Club Civic Award, who's sponsored by the Emerald Coast Knights of Columbus, was the Crew of Bowlegs. When I walked through the door, I almost ran back to my truck to get my sword. I didn't know if this was, I wasn't expecting a challenge. There you go, sir. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Congratulations, crew. Want to get a picture? I'm a little underdressed for this. Thank you, guys. Congratulations. Thank you for participating. The Chamber Award, which is commercial award, the commercial float, is sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. And this year's winner was AJ's Seafood and Oyster Bar. Is anybody from there? Congratulations, team. Congratulations. Thank you for participating. The Angel Award, which is the Religious Float Award, sponsored by Mike Cheney Allstate, goes to Shoreline Church. And you can see why they won. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And the Crowd Pleaser, which was sponsored by City of Destin, was won by the Fort Walton Beach Mardi Gras Club, Queen Vivian Zach. Yay! Thank you, ladies. All right, next on the agenda, we have a presentation on the naming of the Florida Panhandle a National Heritage Area and a request for support from the City of Destin. And our presenter, just state your name.
Great, okay, good? Okay, great. My name is Mike Tillman. I'm with the University of West Florida's Florida Public Archaeology Network. And the reason why I wanted to come and talk to you all today is we're trying to get the Florida Panhandle, Northwest Florida, designated into a National Heritage Area. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of briefly go through the why we wanted to do this, what it is, and then how we're going to get there and how it's going to help all of us in this region. So about 3 years ago, my colleague, Dr. Sorna Hoxad, and myself, unfortunately she couldn't be here tonight, began a 2-year project to do the first assessment of heritage tourism in Northwest Florida. So we started in Pensacola, and over a year we did field work, ended in Apalachicola. We visited over 60 museums that have to do with heritage or cultural tourism, and our results found that the first thing was that the Florida Panhandle has a lot of very significant natural and cultural resources throughout the Panhandle, but not a lot of people really know that outside the Panhandle. And the second thing we found from our study is that a lot of the area museums, while they were doing pretty well, some of them needed a lot of help. And so we wanted to look for different ways that we could sort of remedy these two things. And so we looked through different national programs, state programs around the country, and we came across one that's run through the National Park Service called National Heritage Areas. And so it's important to note, what is a National Heritage Area? A National Heritage Area is a large lived-in landscape that's nationally significant to the history and natural resources of the entire country. And so while it's a program of the National Park Service, it is not a unit of the national park. So if you get the designation of the National Heritage Area, there's no new laws or regulations, the government doesn't come in and take anybody's land, everybody keeps their land, everybody manages their own resources. It's just a federal, or it's actually a congressional designation. And the reason why we wanted to do that is because if you get the National Heritage Area designation, it comes with a lot of benefits. First off, you can brand yourself with a national title, so it's the federal government, it's Congress recognizing the importance of a large area, so in our case, Northwest Florida. And the second thing it does is it brings in technical training and assistance, if the region wants it, through the National Park Service. And then the third thing that's really important for our purposes is that it brings in recurring federal funding. And also it does other things like makes you eligible for grant money that you aren't currently eligible for if you're not a National Heritage Area. And so those are the sorts of things that it can do for the region, not just for City of Destin or Pensacola, but for the entire region. And so the way that you get National Heritage Area designation is the first thing you have to do is conduct what they call a feasibility study. And so over the past year, Dr. Hoxad and myself and a whole crew of other people with the university and just volunteers that we've had have been working towards completing this feasibility study. And there are 10 different criteria that you have to meet in order to become a National Heritage Area. And so that's kind of what we're working on right now. We should be done with that study by February. And that's when we'll submit it to the National Park Service. If the National Park Service likes the study and they believe that we've made a good case for it, then basically they'll say, yes, we think you should become a National Heritage Area. And after that point, then we can take it to Congress, because again, it is an act of Congress. And so the big part of National Heritage Area designation is that you have to show widespread stakeholder and community support. And you get that mainly through letters of support. And so that's the reason why I'm here today, is we're asking the City of Destin to write us a letter of support for this initiative. And the letters of support, we're not asking you for money. We're not asking you to do anything that you aren't already doing. You're already promoting tourism to the area. You're already doing things like parades and helping the Destin History and Fishing Museum in certain ways in terms of infrastructure. So you're already doing the things that we would need you to do. Right now, we have about 120 letters of support from local, state, and federal entities, including several cities, City of Pensacola, Apalachicola, Defuniak Springs, Chipley, Freeport, but we would like a lot more support from local governments. And so I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I've passed some informational booklets out there to you all that has a little bit more information, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you all have any.
Council members? Go ahead, Ms. Ramswell.
So is there any sort of set criteria in terms of you have to prove Indian heritage, or you have to prove Indian anything of that nature?
Yeah, so that's part of the 10 criteria that the National Park Service has. And so, yeah, you have to, basically, a couple things you have to do is, number one, you have to define a boundary area. So that's the map that you see in there. But then, yeah, you have to go and show why you have a nationally significant history for the region. What we believe, based on our study, is that really what's defined our area is a maritime landscape. And Destin fits in very nicely with that. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't just focusing on coast. We also want to include some of the cities and towns to the north that aren't by the coast. And so we looked at the river systems and the different bay systems and how really that's what contributed to the national significance of this area, from lumber to fishing to national defense to innovation to resiliency of the people. You have to be tough to live in this area, as you all know.
Terrific. Well, I would fully support writing a letter if the rest of the council is also on board. And if that needs to be in the form of a motion, then so be it. I would make a motion that we support this initiative by drafting a letter stating as such.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Mr. Mitchell?
I was just ringing in to make the motion, that's all.
All right. Any further comments? I think it fits right into what's important to this community. Our fishing heritage, the maritime aspect of it is most crucial, even though maybe we understand that our earlier, founders and stuff in this area were turpentine producers and stuff like that, but fishing's always been part of it. So we got a motion, got a second. Let's just go ahead and take this to vote, and you'll be done for the night. Vote is unanimous. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
We'll
Appreciate it.
follow up and get with Lance exactly where you want that letter to go to, and we'll get it to you. I'll sign it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and keep us posted on the progress. Thanks.
All right. That takes us, item number 3, public comments. We got, I've got a couple folks that want to talk. Let me look at what these are on. This is the public comment on the agenda items. They're not a public hearing, which we have some of those tonight. Any other matters not on the agenda? I've got 2 cards. I'll call them up first, and if there's anyone here that wants to speak after that, I'll look up and try to recognize you, and you can come up to the microphone. Again, you have 3 minutes, and remember to state your name and where you live. Up first is Ed Rogers.
That better? My name's Ed Rogers. I own a business at 500 Harbor Boulevard. I also live on 410 Spring Lane here in Destin. And number 4, one of the reports, a request from the City Council regarding proposed changes on livery vessels and marine construction. I guess they want some input from you guys on regulations for us. And I just want to say that you guys made some changes last year. I agree with a lot of them, but now we're highly regulated. We have to jump through all kinds of hoops to have a license to operate. Our staffs are very highly trained staffs. If you want to be in the ticket booth in my office, you have to have a boater's license, you have to have a livery license, you have to have first aid and CPR, and that's just to take money at the ticket booth. So we have to prove that we have license, that we have insurance, that we have workman's comp, that we have to show you where our trash cans are and that our bathrooms are ADA compliant, and I have to show you where every boat goes, and I get the fire department to come down and look at my fire extinguishers. We jump through a lot of hoops, and frankly, we feel like we're under assault from the city. I know there's issues with pontoons, and a lot of folks don't like them, but the fact is the problems are folks that don't have a livery license, that don't carry insurance, and it seems like the city's response is to come after us instead of finding those folks out. We've even pointed out who they are, where they're at, nothing happens. and now it looks like they want to do more regulation. And just to, I looked something up before the meeting. I've only been in business 10 years. I'm one of the smaller guys, but I keep my staff year-round. We pay 100% of their healthcare costs. We have tuition reimbursement. In fact, my staff, I only have one employee that doesn't have a college degree, and that's because we pay for their school, so they go to school. We keep them on full-time all year, and since we opened in 2009, we've done 31,549 boat rentals. We've not had a single injury. So we do a good job, even though it's busy and it gets crazy out there. And so I guess I've said all that to ask you if you're going to send recommendations to the advisory committee. I'd ask that at least a couple of us livery guys are part of that conversation, and that we're at the table and we have a real say, because I feel what we feel like is that there's a lot of folks that don't understand our business, making very hasty and uneducated recommendations, and they affect us. They affect, I've got my whole retirement in this business. I bought a piece of property for over $1 million and $1 million in a business, and you know, a decision that's made hastily can cost me all of that, and frankly, I didn't get me real excited. So if you guys would consider making sure that we're part of that conversation, I appreciate it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask? Go ahead, Mr. Braden.
I really don't think that, I know we're not picking on livery vessels. I don't think anybody's asking you to do any more than we're asking any other businesses to do. I know you get a charter boat, the Coast Guard comes through your boat, inside and out, top to bottom, inspects everything. And you gotta have the same license stuff from the city. You can ask Mr. Morgan down there what kind of inspections they get through the restaurant. It's, so I really don't think that everything that you mentioned should be done anyway. So I mean, I don't think we're picking on anybody. We're just asking you to do what should have been done 20 years ago.
And with all due respect, you know, I was at this podium asking for a lot of these regulations, and I agree with them. My issue is that now we want to take it to another level, and things that we've done, some guys for 30 years, now all of a sudden the city has said, no, that's illegal. After when I bought my property, I did all my due diligence. I went to the city and I got approval before I did anything. And let me tell you, I couldn't walk backwards without getting their approval before I opened. And it seems like it's just escalating. And this year, we did a moratorium, which I agreed with. We have these regulations, which I agree with. We had more pontoon boats last year than we've ever had. And it's because there were a lot of single guys out there. We point them out that nothing's been done. They're not getting regulated. We are. And so whatever problems there are, maybe we need to find out, how do we get those guys? There's a boat on Airport Drive, sat there all summer, it said rent me. Reported it multiple times. It's still sitting there, shrink wrapped, ready to go next year, you know? But I'm getting a letter saying that I can't keep my boats on the top side, that it's illegal. Yet, I don't even know if that guy's legal, but I bet he didn't get a letter. But I did. And you know, it's frustrating for us because we're trying to do the right thing.
I have a question for you, Ed. Is there
Yes, sir.
anything specifically in our briefing materials that we're trying to tidy up? Is there any specific language that's a concern to you? Because in general, I think we passed that ordinance to improve things, and you agreed to most of them. Is there anything new? Because I think mostly what they're asking for is just to make sure we have our parking issues defined and stuff like that. I don't think there's any more burdens that we're talking about putting on anybody with
Like
what they're
parking,
asking
for
for.
instance, they're pretty thorough already. I mean, I have to show them a parking map with specific number of spaces, and every one of those spaces is highlighted on the map. So I don't know, I just, how far do you want to go? And I'll tell you, I wasn't going to bring it up, is I've got a meeting Wednesday, and I'm hoping it'll work out, but we all got a letter this year saying that we can't have our boats on the top side of our business, that it's illegal, and we're a pontoon rental business. You rent the boats all year, and at the end of the year, you have to get them out, and you have to scrape them, and you have to bottom paint them, and to be told, well, you can't do that, well, I have to do it. I have to do it somewhere. And personally, I have a piece of property in Pensacola I could take all my boats to, but it's an hour and a half. And that means maybe 4 people that are on my staff don't have jobs because they're not willing to drive an hour and a half, or I can't use them. I've spent over $50,000 in the off-season on mechanics, welders, and upholsterers, reupholstering every boat I have. And if my boat's in Pensacola, I'm going to use a local guy. Why would I drive it back and forth? And it just seems ludicrous that a lot that's closed for the season on a piece of property that we own that's used exclusively for that business, you can't scrape your boat and paint the bottom in a fishing village and a boating community. And maybe, I'm sure there's somebody that's important that doesn't like the look of boats on the harbor, but, you know, if you don't like boats and you live here, that you got a problem.
Ed, and you said, and that was going to be my question too, you said these boats that are on the parking lot, it's when you're closed, right?
Yes, sir.
During the off-season?
Yes, sir.
So it's not the same as if somebody was storing boats in their parking lot and the Upland building is still open?
That's
taking away parking spaces from that business. Is that a fair distinction?
Yes, sir. No, we're closed for
Right.
the season. And really even to call it storage, and again, we're going to meet Wednesday, and I was hopeful we could work through it, but even to call it storage isn't even correct, because I got a letter saying I'm storing boats. I've not been storing boats. I've got guys that have been pressure washing boats nonstop since October, and they're painting, and they're fixing rub rails, and they're doing the things that you have to do to maintain a boat properly.
Yeah, if you were interfering with parking spaces that needed to be utilized and open for cars, I could see the rub, but, you know, aesthetics of seeing a boat being worked on in a fishing community like ours doesn't seem to get me too wound up.
And I will say one other thing. We're very, very conscientious about the environmental impact that we might put on this property. We own it, and we're very proud of it, and we send our mechanic stuff out so that there's never oil or things that you know, are going to affect the foundation and we clean up every day after we work because we care about the property we're on. We don't want it to look like a pigsty because it is 98 and it's where everybody that drives through Destin.
Your particular issue, I don't think is really pertains to what we're going to talk about.
Yes, sir.
So have your meeting.
I will, and I'm sorry we got off on that.
And when you get done with that meeting, if it doesn't suit your capabilities, you can come back before this council, and we can address it
Yes,
at
sir.
that time. But we'll give our staff a chance to work through that particular aspect with you.
And I'm hopeful.
But we appreciate your words. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody have any other questions? If not, thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
All right, up next, I got a blue card. Carrie Harbinger. And after that, I will look out into the audience. If anybody wants to come up, speak, raise your hand, or just jump up and make a mad dash to the podium. Ray, could you clear the clock, please?
Hello. Thanks for hearing me again. Carrie Harburger, Spring Lane. I wanted to see, well, first of all, I wanted to documentedly talk about our Christmas decorations and get the blessing of this council to perhaps create a committee that sees about the decorations of this community for the holidays. Then further, I'd like to see if there was any response. I noticed that Councilwoman Ramswell has asked numerous times from the staff for an update the parcel there, the concrete plant, would continue to lay stuff out. Are we not going to test it? What is the update on that? Because I do know that it did test positive for fly ash. So we need to move forward with something. And I know that Ms. Ramswell's asked twice. So I guess we'll do it again. Thank you. Any questions for me?
Thank you, ma'am. You have a question?
I have a question. Well, I do, but I don't. I know that we got the report back, but I think where we left it last time was that we all felt that there was another report that had come after that one. And so I don't know if y'all have looked into that, if there is another one, if there's any.
Michael's looked into this. I'm going to let Michael answer.
Yeah, we did have a Phase 1 report, and it mentioned that the former concrete plant did have a stock of fly ash and a few silos there, and it listed the rates at which tons per hour, tons per day that they used as part of the mix. But I didn't see it, and I OCR'd the entire report so you could search for particular words, and the words fly ash only appeared once or twice, and it was in reference to how much they had on hand and how much how much storage capacity they had for that. That's the report I found.
Is there another test or some sort of process that we need to go through environmentally before we would build? I mean, because we've even talked about allowing pets out there, and clearly that would be an issue if there is some toxicity in the ground.
This is what I know about that property and the process that we've undertaken. I mean, we would not, as a municipality, been allowed to purchase it had it not passed the environmental tests that we're subject to. I'm not saying those are the most stringent tests we can get. I'm not saying that at all. And I do want to remind everyone that DEP will be heading up this project for us, the renovation project. So they...
DEP, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they for sure will be in compliance with their own guidelines. And if council has other direction as to other testing that they think may be necessary, I can check with DEP, but DEP is, like I said, they will be the project managers for this project coming up. So I'm very confident that they are going to follow the rules.
Terrific. Thank you.
Lance, just to cover all our bases, probably it won't hurt. Send them a letter bringing about that to light and ask them that just for their own personal well-being, they may want to do additional testing. And if they do, have them let us in on their findings, just so we have it on record.
Ms. Harbarger, can you look like you have something to add? And I know this is important to you, so please come up and...
Sorry. Actually, I found the report to be a little bit misleading, and I actually had a chemist look at it, to be honest with you, and it did mention fly ash because it mentioned it produced 27 tons an hour. That's a lot. And also, we never addressed the barrels that are still buried there, that are contaminated. They've never pulled them up, and there is not another report. And I do know that there were some sticky, slippery slopes with this situation. I'm not going to let it go. It tested positive, and that's not at all. I think that whenever you generate 27 tons an hour, you know, and we still have buried material there that was unable to test per that report, and specifically said that there was no chemical testing done to that. It's not, I feel like it needs to be addressed, so.
Where's the buried barrels at?
You know, I don't actually have that in front of me, the environmental report in front of me. There's a map on there. I mean, I guess I could have been, I didn't really expect to go in depth.
Is
I
that
just
the
wanted to
report that we received that I sent to you?
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in that
They're
report
tanks.
talking about the tanks.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and there was a lot of stuff, and actually, they didn't even finish the report, and the lady who was appointed to do the report never even had done a report on fly ash or ever had done an environmental report. It was kind of really a bogus report. I really think for the basic need of the community, we need to reevaluate that, do a proper report, and do good by our people.
Are you comfortable with the DEP folks coming in as part of this process and?
I mean, are they, is that with the process next, is to make sure that they, yes, I guess if that's,
I believe that's
but
what the
it
city
has to be
manager was
addressed,
saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've always known that, guys, living here. You know, we've floundered my whole life, Gary. You know that we've always questioned eating the flounder outside of that concrete plant. I always have, so. And I wanted to make sure, one more thing, since I'm up here, about the parks and the floundering and the boat, that park staying open so that the fishermen can utilize the launching ramp for flounder season. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience that, under item 3, public testimony, that has any comments that is or is not on the agenda outside of public hearings? Seeing no one rushing in a mad rush to the podium, I'm going to close this portion of the meeting, and we will move right on to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4A is in regards to repairs that were made to our street sweeper. This is an after-the-fact request to authorize payment. Initially, staff was given an estimate of $14,882, which required us to open a purchase order, which staff did. Once repairs began in Mobile, the company doing the repairs identified additional damage in the amount of $13,068 to the undercarriage and some other parts of the machine that had to be repaired to make the machine operational. Those repairs were since made, so staff is before you today because the aggregate amount exceeds $15,000, which puts us at the threshold where I need to come back and inform you of the dollar amount. So the aggregate amount is $27,951.88, and staff is asking for your permission to pay Ingram Equipment for the repairs that they've completed to the street sweeper for that amount. And I'm happy to answer any questions and have staff available.
What was the total amount to replace the engine in that thing?
So I'm going to have to ask Mr. Burgess on that because these repairs were to the body. The engine work was a separate issue that council approved that amount in advance of these repairs. I don't remember the exact amount on the engine.
I don't have the exact amount either, but council authorized expenditure of no more than $31,000, and it came in well below that.
So
It was in the mid-20s.
27,951.88.
So we got $27,000 in the motor and another $27,000 in undercarriage? So we got over $50,000 in repairs. What'd that machine cost us? 100 something thousand?
Yeah, we bought it. It was a kind of like a demo. And we got that for $125 several years ago. New units are over $150,000.
Yeah, thank you.
Lance, you said this is after the fact, and I understand that. The invoices are dated the latest invoices are dated 10/10/19. We couldn't find out about it until now? I mean, you know, obviously we're going to approve it.
Back here, I wanted to understand why the company did the repairs that they did. I hope that makes sense.
Well, yes, it does. It's just troubling that we're saying after the fact, okay, when we had the information in October, okay, so we could have had this information in October, approved it, and we wouldn't be sitting up here saying after the fact. It just, the process looks sloppy. That's all.
I understand. The term after the fact is a term that we have within our procurement system, and the work was completed before we got those invoices. So it was going to be after the fact in October or now. I mean, it was still after the fact.
Well, a positive of this, it's been a long time since a trash machine makes the front page of both papers, so I guess that's pretty good.
Ms. Ramswell? No, I'm sorry.
So you
Yeah,
said-
go ahead, just go ahead. I hit the wrong button. Chatham, go next. Go ahead.
Okay. So I guess my question is then, if you received it after the fact, then who authorized the company to go ahead and do these repairs?
I have secondhand knowledge, that was the question that I had myself. And I have secondhand knowledge that it was a member of our staff. I have no reason to believe that secondhand knowledge is not true, but it is secondhand knowledge. And that person is no longer employed with us anymore.
Okay. So here's my next question, and as a female, I have taken my car to numerous places for repairs and been told, oh, your oil change is going to be $150, or, oh, this is wrong, but when we got in there, actually, you need a whole new engine. I mean, things like that, and it just happens, and luckily, with age, I have become a little bit more forthright and questioning, and that doesn't happen anymore. But what I'm getting at here is the fact that, they came to us and said, this is what's wrong with it, this is what it's going to cost to repair it. Why now suddenly do they get in there and they found another $50,000 worth of problems? How, can you just elaborate on that? Because I feel like it's sort of a hook and bait, or whatever that expression is. Well, I don't know if it's switch, but yeah.
Yep. So in this...
You always bait them before you hook them.
In this situation, the additional work was an additional $13,000 and some change. So I don't want to confuse the issue with the engine, because the engine was a separate repair that was made, and that's what really jacked the overall price up. I don't know why it unfolded the way it did. This item should have come to you before the permission to proceed with the additional work was given by our staff, but that's not how it happened, and we have taken steps to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. But at this point, they did do the work, and Mr. Burgess did have numerous conversations with this company. I don't believe it was any kind of a bait and switch, because the items that they said were broke, we believe honestly were broke, and we needed to have them replaced to make this thing functional again.
Okay. It's just clearly just an excessive amount of money for something that now we're already so close to being able to have purchased another one with the money we're spending on repairing this one that it's just hard to swallow. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan.
I share all of the concerns I've heard about the procurement process and all of that, but they've completed the work, so we have to pay it. So I move to authorize the city manager to pay Ingram Equipment for repairs completed on the city street sweeper in the amount of $27,951.88.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Mr. Marlar.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment that due to my low-speed vehicle breaking down halfway through the parade, I got to see the sweet sweeper in action at the end of the parade, so it worked out very well. It did a great job, along with the employees that used the blowers to blow everything that way, because we left a lot of candy behind on the ground. The second thing I say as a comment. Yeah, a lot of peppermints.
Only peppermints.
Yeah. The second thing I make in the comments is in the fact that although the work was done without complete authorization, I look upon it as if you went into some surgery for your appendix or something and they found a cancerous tumor, would you rather they sew you back up and tell you later, or go ahead and take care of the problem at that time and then come back to you? So that's my comment.
All right, I got a motion, got a second. Is there any further discussion? We'll take this to a vote. Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved.
Turn it into a fishing reef.
It'd be a $50,000 fishing reef.
Parks that were broken.
All right, moving on.
Item 4B is a request from staff for direction from the City Council regarding the proposed changes to a livery vessel and marine construction requirements. And we have Ms. Lauren Witt here and some other folks to answer questions about this.
Thank you. The Community Development and Code Compliance Department.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, Jim Green on the Harbor CRA is on his way to the meeting now, and he wanted to be here for this item, so. Yeah, sorry, yeah, I mean, if y'all are okay with waiting, Casey, that's good? Sandy, okay. Yeah, he called me prior to the meeting, and I should have handled it on the agenda approval process.
We got a
We
lot
can
of other stuff. Can we just hold off and just scooch it on down? Is it okay?
Yes.
Everybody, I got a affirmative across the board here, so.
So I would make a motion to set aside the order of the day.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion for set aside? Seeing none? Got to do it by the book here. No problem. Rodney and Chatham. There we go. Ayes have it, so moved. Go ahead on number C. Set aside.
Moving on to item 4C, regarding the Crosstown Connector and the need for a standalone RFQ. I believe state statute does require us to go out, and we wanted to inform council that we needed to go out for a separate RFQ and cannot use one of our continuing services contractors for this role because the estimated amount of the engineering for this project is expected to exceed $200,000, which is the threshold in the state statute. So staff just wanted to let you know that and see if you had any questions regarding that.
Mr. Morgan?
Thank you, Mayor. So, and that 200,000 or more is money that is not budgeted?
That's correct. We have no budget for this right now.
Okay, so this was, and I'll compare this to Bobby Guidry's property that we just rezoned. And we zoned it from less restrictive ROI to, or a more restrictive ROI to a very broad general commercial zoning. But we put on it conditional uses. But when you look at the general commercial, the uses of that property, you could have some very, it would allow for a lot of bad development on that property. But the conditional use makes any future city council who has to approve whatever they want to put on that property. And so we're trusting as a council, against all the neighbors that abut that property that came here and asked us not to zone it to commercial general, we said that, we're putting trust in a future council to make good decisions based on that property. And for the Crosstown Connector, it was fully budgeted, and it was going to be a two-lane road. It was going to be built as a two-lane road. It had a median that would make it a four-lane road if a future council decided to do that. So we're trusting a future council to be responsible with Bobby Guidry's property with the conditional uses, but we're not going to trust the future council with keeping this road as a two-lane road. And instead, we're going to spend $200,000+ on redesigning a road to make it more difficult to build a four-lane road. But in reality, we own 95% of the property we need anyways. We own all the right-of-way for the Crosstown Connector to make it four-lane, so we're really not, we're not stopping much. You know, Azalea Drive is a two-lane road, but it has right-of-way for 4 lanes. That doesn't make it a 4-lane road. It's still a two-lane road, and the Crosstown Connector, to say that anything, it being built as anything but a two-lane road is a lie, because it was fully funded by the TPO, by FDOT, by the county to be built as a two-lane road. And so now we're going to spend over $200,000 to redesign a two-lane road. It doesn't make sense. And we spend hours up here talking about fiscal responsibility and talking about save, $1,000 on the ADT continuing services contract, which I think are all noble discussions. But we need to have some consistency here because it's an incredible waste of money. Because if this two-lane road is built, if we redesign it and make it more difficult to four-lane it, which is why we're spending this $200,000 to redesign it, a future council very easily. So if you're really, and first of all, if we ever get a council that's not going to listen to the general public and they're going to build a four-lane highway through town, then I personally think we deserve it, because we have become a complacent public and we failed to run for office, we failed to be responsive to our constituents. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants a four-lane road. Nobody wants a highway running through there, but it's fully funded as a two-lane road, so we're going to throw more money at it to be a two-lane road, and it just doesn't make sense. So I hope we don't support this, and if we're really worried about future councils making it a four-lane road, we're doing nothing to stop that tonight. Sell the property, and I would vote to get rid of it, and we can be done with this issue altogether, but this isn't going to stop anything, so don't fool the public.
And then a future council could go buy the property back. It's a catch-22. Mr. Braden, you're up, and then Mr. Marler next.
Thank you, Mayor. My thoughts on it are, it's not the council that we can't trust, it was the staff we had we couldn't trust. We know from back in the 70s, it was talked about being a two-lane road for the locals to get back and forth, and Mr. Marler can testify to that. So it's always been a two-lane road, and staff is what changed it to a four-lane road. I'm sorry?
It wasn't a four-lane. It had a median to make it a four-lane.
That's when staff...
The road that was going to be built was going to be a two-lane, no question about it.
But it's a two-lane, but staff had it changed or had it designed so it could be a four-lane in the future, and that was never the intent of the council, or that's never what was sold to the public.
Sure.
And they were trying to do the old bait and switch again, and I don't think that we need to deliver to the public what they were sold, not give them a two-lane road and then let them wake up one morning and they have a four-lane road running through their yard. So, like I say, I've never supported the Crosstown Connector anyway.
Never said yeah.
I just don't think that that it wasn't the council, it was the staff that changed it, and I guess the council at that time just didn't care, didn't read it, whatever, and they let it go on through. So those are my thoughts.
And I completely respect anyone's decision up here not to want the Crosstown Connector, but I cannot respect this as an attempt to dissuade a future unelected council or bad city staff from building a four-lane road, because it won't, because we already own the property to make it four-lane. And so this isn't stopping anything. I respect the council's decision not to want this road. I disagree. I think it'll be a good thing for Legion and Mountain Drive and taking traffic off of neighborhoods. But if that's a decision of the council, that's cool, but don't throw any more money at it, because this road, redesigning this road will not stop anything. And I understand the motion that we made to redesign this road was kind of a compromise, and I also respect, but it was just a bad motion, and it's bad government. And we're letting politics get in the way of good government here, and it's ill-advised, because this isn't stopping anything. This is throwing money it's just throwing money away. And so if we don't want the road altogether, or if we have any fear of it being a four-lane road, just kill it, because this isn't going to stop anything. This is just going to waste city money. And I respect that decision, but I can't in good conscience, support this at all.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yeah, I echo exactly what Chatham said. In fact, he said exactly what I was going to say, only he said it more eloquently. And I, back when we originally kind of halted this Crosstown Connector, I voted against that because I didn't want to stop it then. I thought we were going to be wasting money because I knew we were going to have to wind up redrawing it because at the time, we even said we didn't want Atkins Engineering to be the one that was going to redo it. And they already had the plans drawn up. We've already spent, I don't even know how much money we've already spent on it. But we've got all the money in the bank to do it the way it was designed that we stopped. So I see no reason why we shouldn't just go back to the original plan and even, in fact, go back to Atkins Engineering if we can and just do this thing and not have to spend $200,000 to redraw this just so we can say it's 2 lanes when it's really never going to be anything more than 2 lanes is the way we're going to build it now. So I would vote to not support this and to go back to our original plan.
Mr. Marler?
Okay. First off, I was on previous councils that voted some of this, and I want to defend staff. Council themselves at the time, as Mr. Morgan has stated, other councils can change things. We asked for 2 different designs, as a 4-lane and as a 2-lane. We never intended it to be more than a 2-lane, but yes, it could be a 4-lane. At the time, we also were involved in low-income housing possibilities of using some of that land to build some small apartments or some homes for low-income housing when the Wiedenheimers were on board with that many years ago. Just the giggles and grins part is that Azalea is a 100-foot right-of-way and can be turned into a 4-lane, just like we're talking. Councils after us could do that if they wanted to. It's been talked about. So there's people that say we don't need the cross-county connector. Traffic is not going to get any better on Highway 98. I don't care what anybody says here. The state is not going to. The state's not going to 6-lane every part of it. They can't do anything from the foot of the bridge to Airport Road. The right-of-way is not there for them to get it, and nobody's going to give up their property for it. The crosstown connector was and still is, to me, a way for locals to get from point A to point B without having to suffer through the traffic situations of our 100 days of summer and plus. In particular this morning, with the construction going on at just Stallman and 98, the lights, if you haven't noticed, they've changed the timing on the lights. All the lights are timed for a certain period of time, whether there's any traffic there or not. And I watched traffic back up on the bridge, and there was nobody turning into Emerald Grand, by the way. So I watched traffic back up on the bridge at a normal stoplight. Okay, we take that one step further. There's a way for us to get around that. If you get to the turn lane, you can go through Calhoun and get through the crosstown connector and get to the other side probably before some of those cars even get away there. But I have to agree with Mr. Morgan, Mr. Overdeer. We have a design. We don't need to spend any more money on it. It was designed as a 2-lane. Let's go with the 2-lane. We can't decide what future councils will do. Years ago, I wrote an article about that. If future councils get the right number of votes, they can change anything we do here today, and it's just the way it works. So I can't support this either as far as spending any more money. We need to go back to the original design for the 2-lane, and let's do it that way. And let's get on with this project because I have to agree with Mr. Morgan on the fact, if we're not going to do it, let's get rid of the property.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. Well, it's good to end up the year at our last council meeting talking about this because we certainly haven't talked about it enough. Whether or not, just for the record, whether or not it was going to be a 2-lane or a 4-lane, I sat up here and listened to people talk about 2-lane. When Dr. Ramswell brought up the document about 4-lane, whether it was going to be a 4-lane or not, it was written 4-lane. And after I got all the documentation, I can tell you a dozen different places that it says 4-lane. Regardless, it may be a 2-lane, but nobody can say it wasn't written a 4-lane. With that said, I move to authorize the city manager to publish a request for qualification for design services to design in a 2-lane facility between Beach Drive and Benning Drive, and to bring back a recommended firm for the response for council to consider.
Second.
I got a motion, I got a second. Mrs. Ramswell.
You said a lot of what I was going to say, Mr. Menschel, but it's really insulting to my intelligence and to everybody's intelligence up here to have repeatedly been told and tried to be sold two-lane road, because I sat here, I furnished the rest of the council, I furnished the staff, the public, whoever wanted it. I think I even posted it online. The document where it specifically says 4-lane road. It was to be done in 2 phases. Phase 1 was the 2-lane. Phase 2 was the completion that made it the 4-lane road. And there have been multiple other documents that have surfaced with that same language since that time. So, it really bothers me. I hate that we're coming back, but I understand clearly we have to. We've got to address this issue. I'm to the point where I'm ready to say, screw it, honestly, and I know that's not the most dignified way to put it, but that's how I feel right now, because this whole thing has gotten to be such a disaster and a mess and an expensive mess that, again, why spend another $200,000? I'm sort of at a loss here. If we don't pass this motion tonight, what does that mean, city manager and attorneys? Does that mean essentially it's dead in the water?
I think that staff has no ability, no authority to act then. Do you have any other direction?
That is absolutely correct. Council passed a motion, I don't remember the exact time frame, but it specifically said that staff was to stand down on this project. I was able to bring this back to council because it was requested.
I understand that. Okay.
I would support that, to do absolutely nothing with this property instead of spending $200,000, because, and I understand, and I hear your point about it being a 4-lane road, and I saw the documents that you presented, but the way it was funded was to be built as a 2-lane. There is $0 allocated to make it a 4-lane, and we have a good, responsible council. So we have the control to say, even if we had a county that wanted to build a highway through town for whatever reasons, or FDOT, or since it is a city road, we have the ability to say, no thank you, we don't want your money, we don't want it to be 4 lanes. And my point is, we're building this 2-lane road, but since that property's so wide, we can turn it into 4-lane. It'll be a little more expensive for a future council to do it if we ever had a bad city council and they built it. But my point is, we're really not stopping anything. And so why spend more money on this? When it's already funded. If we truly believe there's merits in the road, that's the reason why we're spending $200,000 to redesign it as a 2-lane, because obviously this council has not given up on the idea of building a 2-lane road, because I think Minchel's motion is probably going to pass 4-3, most likely. So there's support to still build a road through this property. So, but we're not stopping anything, because if we're worried about it being a 4-lane, we already own all the property to make it a 4-lane. We're just going to have a 2-lane road with narrower medians. But there's been no money allocated to make it a 4-lane. And I think it's pretty hypocritical of this city council to trust future councils with Bobby Guidry's property to make responsible decisions there, but we're not going to trust future councils to make responsible decisions with this road. And so we're just throwing money at a problem that doesn't exist. And I would prefer if this council will not go back to the original fully funded 2-lane road that had a second phase that's completely not budgeted to be 4-lane. And I certainly concede the fact, and I realize what you presented. And I would prefer us not to do anything with the property, because this is just a waste of money.
So here's a question to staff. Is there a reason why you went to Volkert and didn't go back to Atkins and say, how could you restructure this plan so that it's not suitable to be a 4-lane, or something of that nature to reduce costs?
Yes, ma'am. And I don't remember the exact time frame. I think it was probably in the June time frame, where I specifically asked the question to council, do you want me to go to Atkins and ask them to re-engineer this project to a 2-lane? And the answer was, it was a no.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. It's clearly, we've talked about it so many times, I didn't even recall that, so thanks.
Mr. Marler.
Ms. Rimswell is probably right about the fact that it says it's 4-lane in one respect. However, Phase 2 cannot be implemented without council approval. So therefore, Phase 1, which is a 2-lane, can stay until future council decides to, if they want to, and Mr. Morgan's right about that. Future council can do exactly what we're trying to stop, and there's nothing we can do about it. We can do what we can to try to convince people that a 2-lane is all that's needed, but we're not going to be able to stop a future council from doing something if they so desire. That's been the rule of thumb since the city was incorporated in 1984, because I've actually overturned some of previous council's rules and regulations. But again, it goes back to staff was not responsible for making it for a 4-lane plan. I was involved in those plans, and I can tell you that council wanted both 2-lane and 4-lane plans, with the possibility of Phase 2 being a 4-lane. But we're not doing that. We're just going to 2-lane. We're going to trash. We'll go back to my first term on council when we had several different plans, the Sasaki plan and all this wonderful fun stuff that we were going to do for the future of Destin. Half of that stuff is on a shelf, still collecting dust to this day. So we're going to do the same thing with a plan that's already there, already implemented, fully funded, and we're just going to throw it out the window, throw more money in there, and then probably, since we're going to have elections next November, which will probably not even have construction started, there may be 4 more new members on council who will have a total different ballgame than what we have now. So I will not be able to support this.
Hey, Rodney, you don't support this road at all, even a 2-lane, correct? Okay.
All right. We have a motion second. I'm going to make my little peanut comments. I don't get to vote on this issue. Y'all knew where I stood originally. I just want council to consider a couple things to themselves. Does a connector help traffic flow? Will it make local traffic easier to flow 3/4 of the year? And with the new high school being opened up less than 600 feet from the area of this crosstown connector, is there a need for a connector of any size, 2-lane, 4-lane, whatever? Those are the questions where we're at. Mr. Morgan brought up the fact that spending $200,000 to build what's already approved to build. We got Secretary Gaynor to hold on to the $2.7 million for the needed right-of-way purchase that is still remaining, and the commissioners are still holding the $4.8 million to actually construct the road. So those are the facts. Y'all make your decision. Without any further comment, Go ahead.
I just can't stomach spending another $200,000 for plans. So I would offer a substitute motion that is essentially no action at this point.
I have a substitute motion and no action. Do I have a second?
Yes, I would second it, but I would ask that our community partners that have held this money, that we inform them that we wish not to proceed with this road, because there's no sense to have this money continue to be tied up. But I mean, that can be a separate motion. But at our TPO meetings, at every meeting, we're wanting an update. Where is the council on this? This money's been budgeted, set aside. So.
Yeah, and we were able to hold everybody off to hang on to the money. So if y'all are going to not build it, just let us know.
I'll second your original motion without conditions.
I have a question.
1 second, Mr. Mitchell. Okay. So I have a substitute motion of no action. I have a second. Mr. Mitchell.
I understood what the city manager said, that he held off going back to the original firm. If we went back to them, we have no idea what they would charge us. It may not be $200,000. We don't know, correct?
That's correct. We don't know.
Okay, so something to consider in that motion is hold off temporarily and authorize the city manager to go back to them and try to get a cost estimate. It may be, who knows? I mean, they've already got all the plans. All you're doing is downside. It may be half of that or even less. I mean, that's just something to consider, to hold off and go back to that original company and at least get a price on that. Something for consideration.
Yep, I piggyback off of what Councilmember Minchell has said, this is, 200,000 is the estimate that they got from Atkins. Is that accurate? Excuse me, who is it? Volkert. Well, if Volkert comes in at 200, and Dewberry comes at 150, and let's say another one comes in lower than that, and somebody comes in, this is not 200,000, we are not spending it tonight, we are sending it out to RFQ was the original. We can have this teeth mashing again when we get the RFQs back and find out what the actual amount to redesign to guarantee the two-lane road shall be. That's not tonight. So I still support going out to RFQ.
Somebody give me a rational defense on how we're guaranteeing that it shall be a two-lane road. It's not going to stay. We're not
Because
preventing the council from anything.
there's still a tremendous amount of right-of-way acquisition that has to occur.
False.
We can build the road right now.
3 lots on Sandalwood.
That's correct.
Yeah, 3 lots.
How much?
We've got money budgeted for it, but even then. if
Without
you
the
had
TDC's funds?
Yeah, but that's what eminent domain's for. If a future council really wanted to 4-lane, we would still have to acquire property to get the 2-lane road built. But
I'll save the suspense. Nobody uses eminent domain anymore.
that's why we've,
Mr. Overdeer.
Okay, I'm not an engineer, so I guess I'm getting confused on this now. If we went back to Atkins, did they not already engineer this? I mean, would they have to do additional engineering? This $200,000 is because we're not using Atkins, right?
Atkins has a plan for a 2-lane road, but it does include right-of-ways that would handle the expansion to a 4-lane road in the future if council desired to do that.
But this $200,000 that we're saying we're going to need to do for engineering, that's because we're not using Atkins, right? I mean, if we went back to Atkins, we wouldn't need to do this engineering that we're asking somebody to do for maybe $200,000?
If council accepted the plan that they've already presented, then that's true.
So I guess I'm just back to my original thing was why didn't we just stay with the original plan we had, and we're just going to build 2 lanes, and it's a 2-lane road, just stick with that, save $200,000 and press on.
I mean, for the right, since we own 90% of that property anyways, could we not build the road as is, as it's been designed, and that extra right-of-way, could we not have our attorneys sell it off, put it in some kind of a trust to where, I mean,
Yes, we could simply not acquire the additional right-of-way that would be needed, and if council so directed, sell whatever properties you want, as long as we go through the proper procedures.
Okay, we're getting into weeds here. Let's deal with the motions we have on the floor before we start getting into what ifs,
Well,
what coulds.
I don't think it's getting into the weeds. I think it's kind of straightening out
Well, we
what
need to vote.
motion we're going to make.
We already got a motion, we already got a second, so let's go ahead and deal with that.
Well-
And then if somebody wants to introduce another motion, they're more than welcome to do so.
if the issue's the right-of-way, why don't we have our attorneys find a solution and build the road as it is and not spend any more money?
Probably need the study.
Well, you can make your feelings reflective in this vote for no action, or you can make another motion after we vote on this.
So I'll withdraw my second, and we can come back to it. But
Because we could do the motion to do no action and then make
that's fine.
another
I'll
motion
support your original motion.
with the new information.
That's what I'm getting at, because it seems like there's a change in the discussion since you made your motions, why I want to go ahead and take a vote on it. So we'll vote at this point.
motion again?
The substitute motion was to take no action, and it was second by Mr. Morgan, correct?
He withdrew his second.
My second.
He
It
withdrew his
stands.
withdrawal. So we are good to vote on this particular motion at this particular time.
Wait a minute, I got a question for Kyle. Okay, so if we vote to take no action and it passes, then we can turn around and make another motion?
Yes, you can make additional motions after this one.
All right, I just want to make sure we're clear so that we're
We
not...
can stay here all
ourselves.
night making motions, actually. All right, so let's go, guys. Ayes have it, so moved. Now
So
I'll
I would
entertain.
move to
Go ahead.
direct our city attorneys to, or city attorney to research a way to look at our right-of-way acquisition to come up with a solution to keep it at 2 lanes.
Second.
I got a motion, got a second. This seems like a reasonable compromise and save the city $200,000 if the council, after we come back, votes to approve it after the attorneys come back. Is that, okay, Steve, you had,
I still have a question. I understand what we're doing, but could we not still go to Atkins and ask them for a quote? That way we'll have that information?
That's what we're doing.
Okay, well, you're asking the attorney, but are you specifically saying to go to Atkins?
Yeah, I don't understand that this motion would contemplate that. I would probably have to use the Atkins design to determine which right-of-way is necessary for the 4-lane design, but I don't think that this motion contemplates going back to Atkins for the 2-lane design. So I
Okay,
think that would
but-
require additional.
But that's my point. We don't know what they're going to charge us. So I think we ought to go down both paths. You're going to review that, but if we go back to Atkins, it's like somebody draws up a house, a blueprint for 5 rooms, and you decide to change it to 4, okay, and you just knock down a wall. The plans are there. We don't know. I have no idea. We don't know what they would charge us, quote, unquote, to redesign it. So can't we do parallel paths here?
I think what Mr. Morgan was alluding to, though, was not to redesign. Have the city attorney
I'm not
speak-
asking to redesign. I'm just saying so that we would at least have that information in our toolbox, okay? If they come back with some kind of plan that would cost money, we can compare what the lawyer comes up with, potentially what Atkins would charge us, just to.
Ray, could you read the motion again so it's clear?
Direct the city attorney to research the right-of-way acquisition to look at, direct the city attorney to research the way to look at the right-of-way acquisition and come up with a way to keep it at 2 lanes.
Shouldn't that be the land use attorney?
How about both of us?
That's fine.
Both?
All right.
The land use attorney, that's, I mean,
Okay, so that's the motion. I've got a comment from Mr. Marlar, and then unless somebody else wants to talk, we'll go ahead and take a vote on the second motion.
From past
Right.
experience and from talking with previous engineers over the years, when we're doing a 2-lane road and there's more right-of-way, once the road is not centered, it's offset so that utilities could be done on one side. If you'll notice, in most residential areas in town, there's a little bit more on one side than there is on the other. So that would alleviate part of the problem by selling off the part, by moving without having to redesign. The road is probably, the 2-lane design is probably going to be offset a little bit, and that will help us out a lot in the long run. So, you know, I can support what we're trying to do now, because at least we're back to using the original design.
Go ahead,
I'd
Ms.
like-
Ramswell.
I'd like to hear Mr. Morgan's thoughts on this, because you made some good points earlier.
On the
On
motion?
Yeah, on the current motion.
Yeah, so we own that big rectangular property, the old campground property, and the last part of it, 10% maybe of the entire road is what we will need to acquire to get the road built, and that funding is included, and it's fully funded to acquire that property. My motion is to see, Kyle and Ken, if we can build the road as it's funded, as it's designed, with big medians, there's not a problem with that. And then where that road goes to that 10% of the property we have to acquire, we can acquire it all if we have to, and then sell the parcels necessary to make it a 4-lane, because you can bottleneck the acquired property at the very end to keep it at 4-lane, or keep it at 2 lanes, and then just to see if there's a solution so we don't have to spend more money. And maybe we can't. If we can't, we can have this discussion all over again.
I already.
Make it a bike lane.
I apologize to the council, I already hit the vote button, so does anyone else have any other comments before we vote? Seeing none, go ahead. Ayes have it, so moved. Kim, Kyle, go to work.
More work on your plate.
All right, city manager, moving on.
Oh, boy.
Did Mr. Green make it here?
He's here.
All right, you guys want to do our set aside? Let's go ahead and knock that out. Next, to set aside, Mr. Green's here for the proposed change delivery vessels and marine construction requirements. So let's take it away, Lance.
All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Witt.
Thank you. The Community Development and Co-Compliance Departments coordinated efforts to review the services and operations of the marine and livery vessel process. The review identified a number of deficiencies and improvements to be made. Community Development and Co-Compliance staff then presented the findings of the review along with the recommendations for improvements to both the Harbor CRA Board and the Harbor and Waterways Board. The respective boards in turn made recommendations to the City Council to address these identified deficiencies. Staff would like to present the recommendations to you and seek your direction. The recommendations are divided into 3 major categories: ordinance-related changes, application and submittal-related changes, and process-related changes. We do have several members of both the Harbor and Waterways Board and the Harbor CRA Board tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tracy, who will be outlining those recommendations. Thank you.
Good evening. As Lauren said, the background, we worked closely with code compliance and also the Harbor and Harbor Waterways and Harbor CRA in getting these recommendations brought to you today. And with that, we will start with the Harbor and Waterways Board recommendations. These are focused on the submittal requirements for the marine construction permit and the Harbor Board application. Currently, the submittal requirements for marine construction permits and the Harbor Board application do not include enough detail. The Harbor and Waterways Board recommendation was to amend Article 110502, removing language if requested, and to include additional site plan requirements for marine construction submittals. The Harbor and Board and marine construction application should be revised to list all site plan requirements. This impact benefits the city because the additional site plan requirements for the marine construction permit will ensure that the necessary information is provided to staff for review. In addition, adding the site plan requirements to both the Harbor Board and marine construction permit application will provide transparency for the applicant. Also, another issue that was determined between staff and the boards was currently there is no policy language governing upland cuts in the Land Development Code and marina siting. This could negatively impact adjacent property rights such as encroachment and riparian rights. The board recommendation was to amend Article 110502 of the Land Development Code to include policy language for submittal requirements and review of upland cuts. This benefits the city because it provides staff with policy language for review of proposed new upland cuts. Additionally, currently, the Harbor Board reviews all new docks, boathouses, and boat lifts. However, new single-family dock requirements that meet City Land Development Code requirements take a minimum of 3 months for approval. The Harbor Board recommendation was to amend Article 110501 to establish a threshold for permit applications that are reviewed by the Harbor Board in which only single-family docks exceeding 1,000 square feet and/or are within environmentally sensitive areas will require Harbor Board approval. The recommendation will expedite single-family dock permits that are under 1,000 square feet and meet the city's land development requirements. And that's the final for the Harbor and Waterways Board recommendations. Now we're going to roll into the Harbor CRA. They touched on the livery vessel registration. They made recommendations to Section 13141 of the Code and Ordinances, in addition to Article 3 in amending the definitions, and also Article 8 for parking design standards. So with that, beginning with the ordinance issues and solutions, there's no submittal requirement which provides staff with an inventory of all current and existing uses on property. The Harbor CRA recommended to amend 13144 of the Code of Ordinances to require a list of all current and existing uses on property to be submitted with the application, to include a list of all seasonal, current, and existing uses, which is the size and quantity, and also require a notarized form of acknowledgement from the property owner. This impact will help city staff gain a comprehensive understanding of the current and existing uses on property to include verified parking spaces requirements for all uses, not only livery vessels. In addition, once again, we're still talking about ordinance issues. There are not adequate definitions for all vessel types, charters, rental, private vessels operating within the city of Destin. Staff requires clarification for determining parking requirements and zoning compliance. The Harbor CRA recommendation was to amend Article 3 of the Land Development Code and Section 13141 of the Code of Ordinances to include a general umbrella definition for passenger vessels that include charter, livery, commercial, recreational, and private marine passenger vessels. By defining charter, livery, commercial, recreational, and private marine passenger vessels under an all-encompassing definition, zoning compliance can be reviewed more efficiently, and a universal parking standard may be applied during the review process. In addition, it was also an issue that was brought forward is there is not enough information regarding the requirement for permanent bathrooms for use by livery patrons. The Harbor CRA recommended amending Section 13145.4 of the Code of Ordinances to include a requirement for permanent restroom facilities to meet and comply with the Florida Building Code for ADA accessibility. This impact will require restroom facilities used by livery businesses. They will be required to meet state ADA accessibility requirements. In addition, we're still speaking on ordinance-related issues. There are no requirements in place which indicate what specifically should be included as part of the parking plan that demonstrates compliance with Article 8 of the city's Land Development Code. Harbor CRA recommendation was to amend Section 13144.9 Code of Ordinances to include a list of requirements for submitted parking plans, drawn to scale and submitted by the property owner. What to be included in those parking plans are the aisle and parking stall dimensions, the total number of dedicated parking spaces provided on property, to identify those spaces used by all subject businesses on the parking plan, whether it be restaurant or livery, and the use, whether it's customer parking or employee. The impact, these additional requirements for submitted parking plans will allow city staff to verify parking and uses in addition to creating uniformity for efficient review. Another issue was the parking standard requirements are not the same for all passenger carrying vessels. The Harbor CRA recommended amending Article 8 0604 of the Land Development Code to require all passenger vessels newly defined have the same parking standard to match the U.S. Coast Guard rated passenger capacity for marine vessels. This would be one space up to 4 passengers, and it would also require staff parking for livery vessels to be 1 space per employee. The impact creates one universal standard for reviewing and confirming parking requirements for passenger vessels, regardless of the specific type. These next issues are related to the submittal. So in the submittal issues, parking agreements that are submitted for other properties are not in standard form. Therefore, the content included, the use, and time periods vary from property to property. Additionally, staff has no way to determine if properties have more than 1 parking agreement per site. The Harbor CRA recommendation was for city staff to create a standardized form for parking agreements submitted by the property owner to include copies of all parking agreements on property, the total number and location of dedicated parking spaces being used, the lease term, in addition to a notarized and recorded form of acknowledgement from the property owner. The impact is a standardized parking agreement will allow city staff to review the use of those parking spaces and for how long, in addition to enforcing parking-related noncompliance. Another issue with the submittals was, as part of the shared parking agreement, different businesses may utilize the same space during various operating hours, day or night. Currently, the Code Compliance Department has no way to enforce shared parking during site visits. The Harbor CRA recommendation was for livery businesses to be required to distribute parking passes to their patrons. As part of the livery application package, the applicant will provide a copy of the parking pass they intend to use for the season to code compliance. The impact will be requiring livery businesses to provide parking passes to patrons, will allow the Code Compliance Division to verify parking agreements on site. Another issue with submittals was the application currently requires an affidavit of no changes. That is not a notarized document. These applications go through a less stringent review. Harbor CR recommendation was to amend the livery application form, removing the affidavit of no changes. Property owners will be required to submit a detailed parking plan, all parking agreements for subject property, and a notarized form of acknowledgement for each year. The impact is requiring applicants to submit these detailed parking plans, parking agreements for subject property, in addition to the notarized form of acknowledgement annually, will help city staff review and verify seasonal, current, and existing uses in compliance with the Land Development Code requirements. An applicant's first stop to obtaining a livery vessel permit is a business tax receipt. There is a misconception with the public that once you receive these business tax receipts that your business has been approved and your use and you're ready to go to work. Harbor CRA recommendation was to change the review process so that the livery vessel application is reviewed in the following order. Initially, Code Compliance will receive the application and review it for completeness. The application will then be forwarded to the Planning Division, and it'll be reviewed for parking, and we will also review the BTR for zoning compliance. Code Compliance will then take the parking verification that Planning has signed off on and inspect that site and make sure that the parking plan meets the requirements or what was submitted. Then building will confirm proper facilities, the ADA compliance, and will issue the BTR. And lastly, Code Compliance will issue the permit and do a final inspection to make sure the decal placement are on the vessels. This impact, a livery application review will be more efficient. The application will be reviewed for parking requirements prior to the issuance of a BTR. And future needs. So the issue is there is currently no inventory of all existing livery vessel rental operators within the city of Destin. The Harbor CRA recommendation was to conduct an annual inventory by the Code Compliance Division. An inventory was conducted from May to October of 2019. Physical inspections of rental locations found 19 businesses, 276 pontoons, 228 jet skis. There were 140 violations discovered, all brought into compliance. And lastly, the verification through the harbor capacity study, which currently right now is pending federal funding. And with that, I open it up to questions and discussion.
Well, don't walk away from the microphone. They're stacking up. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make the recommended motion. I move that the City Council direct staff to proceed with drafting the appropriate ordinances related to the marine construction permit review and the Harbor Board applications and livery registration for council's review.
Second.
I got a motion and I got a second. While you're on the microphone, Mr. Braden, would you like to make a comment before I get to the rest of them?
No, sir, that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ramswell.
Outstanding work and outstanding presentation. Thank you very much. That was terrific. I do have one question, and that is regarding the review process. What sort of follow-up is in place, or what sort of check do you have to ensure that one committee, once they're finished, actually moves it on to the next one, and then the next? Is there some way to make sure it doesn't get stuck in a committee?
By committee, do you mean the different levels of review with the planning and building?
Correct.
Well, so right now, since we're all in the same building, once our review is complete, we let code compliance know, since they're kind of the holders of the application, and then we hand deliver it to the next reviewer. Once the software is implemented, all of these reviews can be done simultaneously. So
yay!
Yes,
Okay.
but right now we always make sure that code compliance is aware of what stage it's in, and then just physically bring it to the next reviewer.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell.
I also echo, job well done, thank you. One question on basically the last page when you talked about the capacity study, and I know we're waiting on federal funds. Do we have any kind of time frame on that?
Not currently. We can prepare an update for you to bring early in 2020. We have continual conference calls with the Corps of Engineers, so we can bring that information to you.
Because if I'm not mistaken, our moratorium was based on that study. And I know we can extend the moratorium, but...
Yeah, I think we have 12 months to work
Right,
with.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Marlar.
Mine's more of a comment. I appreciate everything that they've done. I agree with some of the issues. I disagree with a lot of the other ones. I personally think you've just put about half the delivery businesses out of business, and I look forward to a lot of lawsuits. And that's my comment.
Well, we're not going to take any action tonight. Well, we do have a motion. Would it suit the council if we opened up for public comment right now on this particular deal, or do you want to just allow someone just to weigh in at the end? It's not a public hearing, no, but I was just going to give. All right? No, nobody's all excited about that, so we have a motion, we have a second. Let's go ahead and vote then with no further comment. I'm looking both ways. Doesn't look like nobody's on the list. Let's go ahead. Vote is, ayes have it, so moved. I want to remind you, if anybody does want to make a comment about this, there will be an opportunity at the very end of the meeting for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4D is the Airport Road update. We are looking to engage Volkert Engineering to provide engineering for a guardrail system on the curve of Airport Road. And we're looking for council's permission to do that. Council also directed us to bring back an additional quote. I apologize, it's the, what's the name of the? Thank you. I want to call it the small Jersey barrier, and I know that's not right. So the low profile barrier, total cost including engineering for that type of a system on that curve, according to estimates that we received, would be about $198,000. Total estimates for a guardrail system at the same curve, and this is both in the median and on the airport side of the road, would be approximately $98,000. So we are here to answer questions and are asking for council's approval to engage Volkert Engineering to get this project underway.
Thank you. Just a heads up for everyone, after this particular item, we are going to take a 5-minute break. So, Mr. Mitchell, I'll have you up first.
Thank you. I appreciate following up on that. In addition to that, I discussed with the Public Works Director about if you go across the Mid-Bay Bridge, you see a cable system in a median, and based on that discussion, that wasn't feasible either. But the one thing I do want to ask a couple of questions do we automatically go to our continuing services contract, or have we tried to bid this out for a better cost?
In this case, because of the state statute, we've vetted them for their qualifications. And so at that point, we get council's permission to negotiate the contract, and that's what we're asking for tonight. It's a different, since it's a professional service, it's that one area where the state statute kind of dictates how we have to handle it.
Okay, well, the reason I bring that up is, if you remember, 2 meetings ago, Councilmember Morgan asked about if I had that email from the state when they asked us, when I said that proceeding with this would not in any way impact the grant. That's back when we had the grant. And at the time, and I'm looking at that email, and basically, looking at the proposal on page 203, it's quoting the unit price at $65 a foot. Okay, is what on page 20, PDF page 203 of our packet. According to the state, when they sent me that email, they said regarding the guardrail price of $18 to $19 per linear foot. Okay, is what the state, in their email to us. They said with inflation, the work would be around $10,000 to $15,000. This is only, okay, for 300 linear feet, not 800. But when you do the math on that, that's 45,000 as opposed to 65,000. So again, I'm questioning the cost, okay? Is there any way of us trying to be competitive with this thing? Because based on what the state said, this appears to be high.
Yeah, and I apologize. The aggregate number I gave you was also, it included engineering and installation. And the installation numbers were given to us by another one of our continuing services contractors. And we can absolutely go out and solicit more bids for that work. It's the engineering work that we have to work off of the qualifications. But the actual installation, we can absolutely go back out. So I apologize.
No problem. Thank you.
Mr. Amswell.
Thanks. So a few questions. One of them has to do just essentially with this particular estimate that we received. I note that they say that there needs to be a 12-foot clearance in order to do the cabling system, and that it would require maintenance. So I'm wondering why they ruled that out for the median section, since it's cheaper than the guardrail. I understand that there's not a 12-foot clearance on the northern side, but we're not looking at keeping this there indefinitely to worry about repeated maintenance. So why would it not have been considered for the median section?
No, we didn't ask them to consider kind of a split approach with guardrail on one side and cables on the other side. We just asked them for their best engineering estimate for cost associated with designing a guardrail system temporarily, and then the installation of the low-profile barrier. And based on Mr. Warnke's comments that you do require 12 foot of recovery after the cable system, and on the outside of the north curve, you only have 8 feet before you hit the sidewalk, and that was his main concern about the use of that product.
That wouldn't be the case for the median. You would have that 12 foot. If you didn't ask him for that, then it wasn't asked for. So I went back through, because I know this has been an issue that has been going on at least since 2009. So I went back through different minutes and different meetings where this installing a guardrail or barrier of some sort had been discussed in the past. And one thing I found really interesting was back in 2010, when it was presented to them that they needed to do some sort of barrier system, the city engineer stated that this was not a city issue, that it was a county responsibility, and that the city did not have to pay for this, that the county would be the ones to do so. And the same thing was said at another meeting in 2011. And so I'm just wondering if that was just an error and a comment at that time, or if that's something we should look into.
I think we should definitely look into it. I know that originally, and I don't know the actual date, but originally that was a county road. Whether, I don't know the date when we officially took that over, or if they still have partial responsibility, but we can check into that for sure.
Yes, certainly, if they need to bear some of the burden of the costs for whatever is done there, absolutely. And I believe that's all I had. The date of that meeting where they said it was the county responsibility was 7/6/2010. It said 7/6 in one place and 7/7 in another, so whatever date that meeting fell on.
Thank you for that.
Is that it as far as the update? 5-minute break. If everybody could find a seat, please. We're going to start this meeting and try to get it done. We still got some public hearings to do.
Oh, gosh.
Even our council members need to come back.
The video feed cut out.
I know. I'm going to make mention.
That's okay. When you hit the gavel, the video feed cut out. We got 2 more items on. We pull E or?
All right. Looks like we've almost got everybody back. All right, while we're waiting on Mr. Destin, on the last motion, we took the vote, ayes had the vote, so it was moved, but the video had turned off. So I just want to let everyone know that we're back live again, and so that's what happened during that vote. The motion passed. Now, I guess we'll just go ahead and start. Go ahead. Park will get here soon enough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4F is the 2019 fourth quarter financial report, and we have Mr. Farmer here to present that to you. Before we do that, though, I did want to let council know that in addition to these quarterly reports, which you've been receiving regularly in the future, the council, after the new year, will begin to receive monthly reports with the revenues and expenses for that month on them, and we will make those available to council in whichever format is easiest for council to read them in. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. But for this quarterly report, we have Mr. Farmer here to answer your questions on it.
This is the fourth quarter of 2019, just an accumulation of the year-end spending and investment report. Nothing really jumps out other than we ended up with about 95% of our budgeted revenue, with the primary shortfall coming in the intergovernmental, which is our grants and things of that nature. And then from an expenditure standpoint, we were about 93% of our spending, which is a little lower than a normal year. Normally we're at around 95 to 97%, but still very commendable to the staff for their consciousness on how much they spend in their budgets and whatnot. If you have any questions, I can answer them. The investment report's also in there. It just kind of summarizes how well we've done this year. This year, of course, investments across the board have done well. So if you have any questions, I can answer them for you.
Ms. Ramswell.
Thanks. I have a question. Why was our year-to-date actual $1 million less for intergovernmental?
That's grant revenue. So if we say you receive $2 million to build an XYZ road and you only complete 20% of it this year, then you can only apply for what you actually completed, and then that grant will roll over to the next fiscal year.
So it's not that we were expecting $3 million and only got $2 million, so we're $1 million upside down?
Yeah, we're not upside down. We will apply for those monies in later years.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for our finance director? Seeing none, thank you. We're going to go over to the Cybert Road. Did you skip one, Lance? The Cybert parking lot, or did we pull that? Okay.
We did, and I can touch on that real quick. We did pull that item so that staff would have a chance to bring it back after the new year.
Oh, okay.
We just wanted to clean some things up before it was presented to the council. Item 4G, code compliance evening shift. Staff is asking council's permission to move forward with some ideas that council has presented to staff in the past, both during council meetings and at the visioning session. Staff is asking for council's blessing on 2 code enforcement additions and the replacement of 1 truck. We would use these additional resources to expand our hours well into the evenings and weekends, which is when a lot of our problems occur. And we have Mr. Joey Forgione here to answer any specific questions regarding this. Thank you.
No questions? Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
I've discussed this before, but I wanted to get Mr. Forgione's take on this. I see the day shift is 6 to 3, and the evening shift comes on 3 to 12. Would it be a big hardship if we had a lapse between 3 p.m. and let's say 6 p.m., where we didn't have an officer working for those 3 hours? And the reason I bring that up, again, I've said it over and over and over as a suggestion. I think if we're going to have an evening shift, stopping at midnight's not enough, okay? If we're going to look at some of these parking issues with the short-term rental things and whatnot, we need to have at least a 6 to 2 shift, something like that. So I realize we don't have the manpower, but would it be that much of a hardship to not have somebody between 3P and 6P?
What I was going to do is try and just, this is from me studying it and through my training experience, knowing that we got to bring them up to about midnight. After midnight, it can get a little rough, as you know. I can look at it as we move into, and if we're not hitting those parking complaints, because people will be at dinner, or the sheriff's office gets a lot of calls, so they're going to be dispatching us. I can readjust in the middle of it. But this is just a sample. I could change it from a 5 to 2 and a 2 to 11, or go to 7 to 4 and 4 to 1. I can play with that. I just don't want to burn out the guys.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any further questions. Go ahead, Lance.
Staff is requesting a motion to approve either 1 or 2, or none, if that's your decision, but 1 or 2 positions at $67,611 each, for a subtotal of $135,222, plus a not to exceed $29,000 for the additional vehicle, which is a replacement vehicle for, I believe it's a 2002. 2002, so almost a 20-year-old vehicle. I believe our code enforcement should be represented a little bit better than that out in the public. So I would appreciate your consideration of this item, and we believe that the funding source for this can be the actual fees received by the code compliance department. And it should offset these costs.
Mayor, I move that the city council direct the city manager to hire additional personnel for the code compliance department to cover an evening shift in the amount of $135,222, and to include the purchase of a replacement vehicle not to exceed government contract price of $29,000, and make the appropriate budget amendment using short-term rental registration as the funding source.
Second.
I got a motion, I have a second. Ms. Ramswell.
I was going to make the motion.
Okay. All right, we have a motion second. Does anyone have any further comments on this issue? Seeing none.
Just a few quick announcements. The city...
Ayes have it, so moved. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm jumping ahead. My apologies.
Yeah, you and me are on the same page tonight. We're not. We got Christmas carols in our brains. Let's go.
Sorry. City facilities will be closed on December the 24th and December the 25th, as well as on January 1st. Just wanted to let everyone know that we do plan to close on those days. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to move right into our public hearings. Our last one's a quasi-judicial, correct?
That's correct.
The rest of them are straight up?
Yep, quasi-legislative.
Okay, well, Mr. Bowman, would you like to take us away? Item 5A.
Yes, first we have item 5A, the second reading of ordinance number 1934 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the official zoning map as referenced in the Land Development Code, section 7.12.01A2, zoning maps to include a change in the zoning designations of the parcels described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from residential, office, institutional, tourist development, ROITD, to commercial general, CG, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for zoning map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And this is a public hearing.
Okay, seeing how this is a public hearing, I will open the public hearing portion of this second reading. Does anyone in the audience have anything that they'd like to say pursuant to ordinance 19-34-LC? Seeing no one, I will close this public hearing portion, and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. I move to adopt ordinance 19-34-LC on second reading.
I have a motion,
I'll second that.
and I have a second. Is there any further discussion on this particular ordinance? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved. Mr. Bowen.
Next, we have item 5B, the second reading of ordinance number 1935 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the official zoning map as referenced in the Land Development Code, Section 7.12.01A2, zoning maps to include a change in the zoning designation of the parcel described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from Bay Estates BE to Recreation, REC. Providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for zoning map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
And at this time, I'll open up the public comment period for this hearing. Does anyone wish to make a comment on the second reading of ordinance 19-35-LC? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment portion of this second reading and entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. I move to adopt ordinance 19-35-LC on second reading.
I have a motion.
Second.
I got a second. Is there any further discussion on this particular ordinance? Seeing none? Vote is unanimous, so moved.
Next, we have item 5C, the second reading of ordinance number 1936 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Article 2 of the Land Development Code, providing for procedures for lot splits, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. I will now open the public comment portion of this public hearing. Is there anyone that would wish to comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt ordinance 1936 LC on second reading.
I have a motion.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none? Vote is unanimous, so moved.
No, you two down there.
They're eating candy. All right. 5D, sir.
Yes, next is 5D, the second reading of ordinance number 1937 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Article 7 of the Land Development Code to revise the residential office and institutional village residential zoning district, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
And seeing how it's a public hearing, I'll open this up for public comment at this portion. The second reading of ordinance 19-37-LC. Does anyone wish to speak from the audience? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt ordinance 19-37-LC on second reading.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any further discussion? Seeing none? All right. Then I will back right on up. Go, who wants to go first? Mr. Braden.
Why are there, on the charts on this item, why are they referring to Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3?
The charts were actually amended, so they are correct, but when staff pulled the charts from MuniCode hadn't been updated yet, so they show the old one. But really what's in effect is the tiers are already deleted.
So we can't put the updated charts in here?
Well, we can, but they're not on Unicode for them to cut and paste, and they didn't have the ordinance when they did it, I suppose. But yes, it's not changing them back to the tiers because that text is not shown as being replaced, underlined. It's just the underlined and struck through text that is actually changed. But regardless, you're right, it should be the updated chart that's in the ordinance.
Okay, if we can get the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 stuff gone, I asked 2 years ago.
It has been erased, it is gone. They just put the wrong
Why are we still
chart.
referring to tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 2 years ago, and it's still popping up? So if we can, through our cleansing process on the documents and stuff, if we can get rid of that, that would be great.
The ordinance just needs to be sent to Municode.
Thank you.
No further discussion, let's vote. Vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Bowman.
Next, we have item 5E, the second reading of ordinance 1938 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to the use of wheeled vehicles on public and private areas of the beach, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for an amendment to Land Development Code, Section 11.08.02, amending subsection 7.5, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is public hearing.
Thank you, sir, and I'll at this time open up the public comment for second reading of ordinance 19-38-LC. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment on this ordinance? Seeing none,
I move the city council adopt 1938 LC on second reading.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion on this motion, on this ordinance? Seeing none? The vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Bowman.
Last public hearing we have is item 5F, which is Interlight Engineering Corporation on behalf of Legacy Properties of Northwest Florida LLC, requesting approval of a final plat for a major subdivision identified as Tuscan Village. Proposed development consists of 86 townhome units. The proposed project is generally located west of Mattie M. Kelly Boulevard, addressed at 500 Mattie M. Kelly Boulevard. Total site area is 7.81 acres, more or less. The preliminary plat and development order were approved by City Council on May 20th, 2019. If I could get the members of the public who plan on testifying and members of staff who will testify to stand, I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is the truth? And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Kopp.
We're going to enter the entire staff report into the record as the city's Exhibit A, and other than that, we are available for questions, and the applicant is here.
I'll entertain a motion and then have discussion, or do?
We do need a public hearing, and you might want to check with the applicant if he wishes to speak first.
Okay. Well, I'll open up this portion of the hearing for public comment. Do you have anything you want to come up and say, or? I'll answer questions if you have any questions. You got it. You can stay right there at the front. Does anyone else in the audience have anything that they'd like to say concerning this proposal? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I move to approve the final plat for the major subdivision identified as Tuscan Village.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Is there any questions or further comments necessary? Go ahead, Ms. Ramsey.
I have a random question. Are you doing the Lola Circle property as well? We've seen you before. I'm just trying to put which other property it was.
Yes, ma'am, that's Beach Lofts.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I thought
I
so.
came before council for that and in Henderson Beach Resort as well.
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions any council members have, any discussion? Seeing none at this time, go ahead and take a vote. Vote is unanimous, so moved. Thank you very much. Item 6, Lance?
We have staff here available to answer any questions regarding the consent agenda, and I do understand one item, I believe item D, was pulled for discussion. I'm sorry, D and F were pulled for discussion.
Yeah, I had E. All three?
I think 4E was pulled, but 6E was not. Is that correct? If I think you were the one that...
I think he pulled, he said the wrong number.
Mayor, I'm going to go make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda with the exception of those items that have been pulled.
Can you specify?
I think that's just D and F. Is that correct?
D and F. That's
Okay.
all I had was F.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the consent agendas, items A, B, C, and E. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion on this portion? Seeing none? Ayes have it, unanimous, so moved. I guess we pulled E and F, right? So I guess we'll start having discussion. D and F, Development Review System Software Update.
That was Rodney, right?
Rodney.
Thank you, Mayor. The only question I have, Webb, is number 6, where it talks about the IT still working with the county and the property appraisers. I thought we was past that stage.
No, we are continuing to work with them on that process. In fact, we have a meeting, I think, on Friday with them, because as we're going through this process, we want to make sure that we continue to be in lockstep as we're moving forward on this technology. So that is going to continue to be in process as we come to the fruition of this entire project.
So they'll, pretty much in a nutshell, they'll be involved to the end. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Braden. And then that moves us to resolution number 1929, interlocal agreement with Destin Fire Control District.
We have to vote on that one, don't we, as part of the consent? Segregated?
Oh, yeah, I'll need a motion.
Motion to pass item 6D.
Second.
Any discussion? Thank you, by the way, Ms. Ramswell. I'm still Christmas caroling over here. Ayes have it, so moved. All right, item 6F. Who pulled it?
I did.
Start.
Counselor, you want to start off explaining why this has been updated, please?
Yeah, sure. So what happened here is council approved a very similar version of this resolution and interlocal agreement with the Fire Control District back in September. After we approved it, the fire district considered it, and the fire district actually, despite sending it to us for approval initially, wanted to add a provision in it that would include to our scope of services that they are providing to us for beach safety services, that they would also provide safety services for Noriego Point, and that, as has traditionally happened, the county would pay for that. Probably should have been part of agreements prior to this one, that scope of services includes that property, since it is city property, but it was never included until this agreement. So that is the only provision. It's 6.2 that is added to this interlocal. It is different from the one that was passed in September.
All right, thank you for that. A couple observations and a bunch of questions. On, I guess it's page 346 of the agenda packet. I'm trying to get to it. It's page 3 of 12. It talks about the city having a right to do an audit from time to time. My first question is, have we ever done an audit of these contracts historically?
Not to my knowledge with the fire district.
Okay. On page 10 of 12, in the scope of services, it discusses a social media page that proactively updates the current beach flag. Are you aware that they do not have that?
I'm not aware of that until now.
All right. Did we get a detailed, comprehensive report to us by the 2nd of November of this year?
I do believe that the Fire Control District provided statistics for the year to us this year.
Okay, it wasn't included. I wanted to know if we got that because, again, there's a bunch of stuff in the scope of services that apparently we're not verifying that we've done it. Just, again, troubling with contracts. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve this. I just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. Make the motion to approve item.
Okay.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Ms. Ramswell, you have something you'd like to add? I had you on the list.
I did, and it has to do with the fact that we've talked about the first responder 10% with the TDC funds and our need to go back to them as they prepare their next budget. And I'm just wondering if this is a number that should be included in that. I would say yes, but it's certainly something that we need to keep in mind to propose when we do go to them.
I believe staff has direction to, during that season when it comes up, provide additional information to the county related to that.
That's it.
All right, well, I have a motion and I have a second. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved. Now, moving on to item number 7, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. First up is the 302 and 288 Harbor Boulevard. I met with the applicant. He's got went through several months, not a year, of process of trying to get these docks permitted. And I believe it was a major screw up on the city's part. When it come to get the permits, that there was a fee that was not mentioned along this process. There was, if you want to get into a lot of discussion, we can. I don't think it would be necessary, but I would really want to make a motion to, well, first, I think we're receiving 15 transient boat slips with this property. So with that, I would like to make a motion to waive the fees for the NPEB on 302 and 288 Harbor Boulevard.
Second.
I got a motion, I got a second. Discussion on this item. Any questions?
Yeah, can somebody
Go ahead.
elaborate, or maybe you, because I have no idea what's going on.
What is basically the public benefit on this property is my understanding, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, was never mentioned really through this whole process, which there is public benefit with the livery vessel or the transit slips that they're providing for the city. And you're supposed to be getting a credit for these transit slips, and that goes towards the
NPD.
yeah, towards that fee, and which it should wipe out the fee. The applicant's already paid close to $10,000 in fees towards these. So, and why there's, it just seems like when Lewis is out of town, I don't know why the planning department just comes to a screeching halt. When it comes to this kind of stuff, there should be a formula that anybody can pick up and figure out what the public benefit, what the credits would be, and recalculate the fees on that.
You'd like to address that, Ms. Cobb?
Kyle handles the harbor board and dock permits.
Okay, well, Mr. Bowman.
So this portion of the process is not something I'm super familiar with, as once it is approved by City Council, my involvement generally ends. However, there's pretty specific code language in this instance in 11.05.02 that requires that the 25% fee be paid. Looking at it real quick, I don't see any method for the City Council to waive that fee. I'd also like to hear from Ms. Bell, since she deals with this regularly.
well, I'm not the one that deals with it regularly, but I do have knowledge that there is ways to mitigate the fee, and we do have a policy in place that they can use to mitigate the cost of those NPVs. They get credits for certain things that they can do or what they do.
So would the transient slips that were offered by the applicant at the time, is that something you can consider in the mitigation?
It's not currently written that way with the policy we have now, but, I mean, that's something that could be brought up for discussion. I know Lewis had planned to look at that upon his return tomorrow, and he was going to reach out to the applicant then.
Okay, a simple question. I have a couple people lined up here. Do you have any further comments before I get comments from the council members? Kyle?
I am uncertain, as I sit here today, whether the city council can actually waive this fee, so I would ask that you don't pass a motion waiving the fee at this time.
There you go. Do you want to amend your motion, Mr. Braden, not to waive the fee, but to open it up for mitigation with the community development? Would that satisfy us legally?
Yes, of course, there is a mitigation process, and I think Lewis understands this is fairly urgent, so when he returns, he does intend to go through that mitigation process.
I really find it real hard to believe that this council cannot waive a fee. I'm not buying that.
Generally, when the code speaks, it would contain a waiver process. If there is some sort of waiving of the code that is allowed, once you act legislatively, generally you can't just undo things in particular circumstances. So.
I think that I'm not going to substitute my opinions. I'm going to supplement what he said. There is a really probably philosophical good reason why we don't just willy-nilly ignore our codes and waive, but I think there's a way to legally do what it is equitably that we need to do. Because I'm in agreement with what has been remarked so far. It appears that there is a net benefit that we are getting by virtue of the marina itself, which is certainly somewhere around 12 to 15 transient slips. And in my mind, if they're going to be transient forever, that means Mr. Perry can not earn income off of them. They are not going to be slips that earn him money. And I know that the going rate for a slip, depending on size and where it is in the harbor, can go anywhere from $800 to $1,200. You can guess at $1,000, 12 to 15, that's about $12 to $15,000 a month. You multiply that by a year, you can get well north of what this impact fee back to the city and the public just within the first year. I think that clearly there should be, we know what the right answer is. I think it's just a question of you call it. I don't think legally we probably can waive, but we can certainly mitigate, and I think we need to mitigate it down near to zero, because I understand the public purpose behind having a net public benefit assessment. It's when somebody builds a big marina and they're going to make a lot of money off of all the slips, how do we gain something back for the city? It's the same as any other general impact fee. The idea is they pay a lot of money into a general fund that we go as a council and then spend for the public benefit. Well, the public benefit we're gaining off of this design is the fact that there's going to be a ton of transient slips, and we're desperate for them. So I think probably the best way to do it is to instruct staff to assess a mitigation rubric that gets us to the right answer, without it necessarily having to get us into trouble with setting aside our code and going down this road of waivers, because you can see how that could get sticky, and where if you had a council that in the past or in the future was wanting to just engage in favoritism and just ignore its own codes and just, oh, nope, you don't get to assess it. I think this is the way to get to the right answer.
We do have that motion in a second, and I got a line of people that like to talk, so let's go ahead and hear everyone out. before we go and take a vote on that particular motion, or maybe there's a substitute motion somewhere in this lineup. Mr. Oberdeer.
Yeah, I mean, my only question was going to be, I don't know if that's legal for us to do it either. And I'm not a lawyer and don't know that we can decide that tonight. But in any event, I agree with what we're saying, that, the public benefit that he's going to be giving us far outweighs this fee that we were going to charge him, $120,000 or $140,000, $150,000. We're going to get that back as a public benefit well within a year. So it would seem to me that tomorrow, when Lewis walks through the front door and sits down and calculates this, there is a way for him to come up with a formula that says, yeah, this public benefit we're getting is equal to or greater than the amount of the fee that we were going to charge him. And so I would just see if we can just direct staff to make sure that when the first thing that Lewis does when he walks through the door tomorrow morning, have his cup of coffee waiting for him, and so that he can sit down at his desk and go through this right away. Because I know that Mr. Perry has an issue with his contractor, and so there's really it's kind of a time-sensitive thing. So if we could kind of get this resolved maybe first thing tomorrow morning, that would be great. And then that may just, we don't have to go through this routine where we're not sure that we're on legal footing to do this tonight with our say-so, but we're certainly pushing to get something like this done.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Morgan.
I certainly believe that, the city needs to have impact fees in place, and this marina's case of, 15 transient boat slips, I think that impact fee should be zero. So however we can get there, I will support and get there the fastest. And even take this out of account, I think a 25% impact fee for any marina, even if every slip were all commercial, I think that's overly onerous. That's a lot of money. 10%? Okay.
State is 10%, we're 25.
The state's 10%, the city's, so we're taxing the 35%. That's quite a lot of money, but in the case we're talking about tonight, I think it should be zero.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Mitchell.
I pretty much echo what everybody said. One of the thoughts I was thinking about when we said it's not currently written, well, we don't know what was written back then. We don't know what approval we had. Again, this is historical. The checks that Mr. Perry wrote and everything else, historical. Are you considering a substitute motion or modifying? Because if not, I will. But if you're going to make a substitute motion, I'll let you do it. If not, I was going to do it. Or modify your motion.
Yeah,
Amend it.
You got the floor, Mr. Braden.
I'd just like to say that it's frustrating that we take zero responsibility for our actions. I mean, it's clear that, there's been mistakes made, and I find it hard to believe that, or troubling that Lewis is the only person in the staff of the city that can do this. So if Lewis gets killed in a car wreck on the way back here tomorrow, then nobody can fill in, nobody can figure out this formula? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, what the problem is, it's written in code, and the staff doesn't have the liberty to change that.
There's a formula for this. There's got to be.
Well,
Is there not?
If I could just interrupt for a second, and like I said, I do not handle dock permits and the harbor board, so I don't have all of the information, but right before the meeting, I did talk to Noel, because several council members did ask me questions, and I hadn't been involved, and I wanted to get some background. And staff did pull up an old written policy where there are specific mitigation factors that can be considered. And no, Lewis isn't the only person that could read them. I think they just said that because he's the boss and they know he's coming back in the morning, but probably anyone here could do it. It was found and pulled up this afternoon. What I would also suggest, though, is that those mitigation factors or any other that you deem appropriate are codified, because having them as a separate policy outside of the code is not the best practice. Also, if you all believe that the 25% is too high, as Councilmember Morgan suggested, we can at the same time do a code amendment to reduce it to 10% or whatever you all think is appropriate. And we can address Mr. Perry's problem even before that occurs.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is there not something where we do, an applicant gets a credit for certain public benefits?
There is a list of credits and exemptions that staff has in a written, uncodified policy. But my suggestion is that we codify an updated version.
Okay. I think with that said, I'll just go ahead and withdraw my motion.
Okay. And do we need a motion for you guys to move forward, or I think we have a consensus and guidance to the council and the staff on what we would like to see take place? So we'll just leave it at that. How about that? Are you good with that? This was your item, Ronnie.
There's a current motion on the floor, substitute motion right now, with a second.
I didn't hear a substitute. I thought we just had the initial. He talked about it, but he didn't do it.
I just said that if Rodney was going to make it, I would make one, but I did not.
Okay.
So the original motion maker withdrew his motion, so we're done. Correct? All right. Anything else, Mr. Braden, while you have the mic? Turn your mic on.
That all the staff that participated in making this Christmas parade possible, I think all of them had to do something. And then the staff that had to come behind it and clean everything up, they did an amazing job. Another thing is there any way possible, or if the attorneys can look into it, with over on the west side of the Destin Bridge or Muller Bridge, where we leased that property to put our sign, if we can see if we couldn't expand that and lease that whole parking lot area?
Yeah, either me or Ms. Copper, both of us could look into that.
While you're bringing that up, Mr. Braden, you know that back in the late 60s, William Frank and a couple guys had leased that whole point as an attempt. They were going to do, of course, we weren't a city back then, but for a municipal marina.
No way.
Yeah, and William Frank actually has the original agreement with Eglin Air Force Base. So I'll be going by Laurel Hill this weekend, and I'll see if I can't get that, and I'll get it to Mr. Bowman, and
that'd be cool.
Maybe start a conversation with him.
Yeah,
So
if we can't take that over and, or lease it, 99-year lease, something like that, and have more public beach and, clean, keep it clean. I guess we need to get the consensus of the council on that.
The direction is for Ms. Kopp and I to simply look into it and bring it back to council. Is that what it is? Okay.
All right. Anything else, sir? Ms. Ramswell.
I echo what Mr. Braden said. The Christmas parade was incredible, great experience, super weather, super turnout. It was just wonderful. So thanks to staff and everyone that helped put it all together. I'm sorry, Kyron, that you broke down again. I felt sorry for you, but I didn't know what to do.
Staff was helping out with that one, but they got me back on track.
Also, some good news, the progress on Destin High School continues. It is now open for applications for grades 9 and 10 for next year. So we are moving right along, and there's going to be a huge town hall and pep rally on January the 16th at our future location, which will be Destin United Methodist Church. We did sign the sales contract, and everything is moving forward. We're just thrilled to death. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you. Have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and happy whatever you celebrate.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Mr. Mitchell.
Okay, Mayor, let me start by, it's my pleasure to nominate Mr. Richard Hickey for membership to the Public Works Public Safety Committee. He's here, he sat through all this, he attends this regularly, and it's my honor to nominate him to be on the Public Works Public Safety Committee.
I'll second.
Whoever.
Okay, we got a nomination. We got a motion and a second. And whenever you get nominated, you are going to become appointed around here. So let's go ahead and take a vote. Just don't ever raise your hand. It's on TV. The cat's out of the bag.
Okay.
The vote is unanimous. So moved. Thank you for volunteering, sir.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, and I do believe, I think there's some other open seats for other people, so contact the city if you're interested in that. I too would like to echo my thanks for the Christmas parade in addition to the Christmas party by staff. Everybody did a great job. In case y'all don't know it, one of the gifts Lewis got was a bunch of lottery tickets, and that's probably why he's not here, okay? Because he won, okay? At any rate, I have a couple of questions. I'm trying to kind of close out the year, and this is just some pending things. First of all, at the last meeting, we had discussed the generator at the sheriff's office building, and I asked Mr. Farmer if we had paid for that. Were you able to check on that, Mr. Farmer?
The generator.
I didn't mean to wake you up.
At the sheriff's office.
Oh, yes, it's, I looked at the last 2 years' bills for the generator at the sheriff's office, and I looked at the bills for all the generator work, and there were 3 charges with the latest, I believe, in July, where they stated that the generator was not working, and we have not been charged anything since then.
Okay.
Now, I don't know specifically when. I assume that's when they determined that the generator was not just broken but unfixable.
So you're saying we paid 3 times that we shouldn't? Is that?
No, I'm just saying that we continue to pay the contract per the service, the continuing service agreement through the July service, when they determined that the generator was unrepairable and would have to be replaced.
Okay, all right. Now, we'll let that slide for now. Mike, at the couple of months ago, I asked about the lights blinking at 98 and Triumph. Any update on that?
Yes, sir. I reached out to Metric Engineering. They're the group that are in charge of the Highway 98 widening. Because that intersection right there is slated, as we all are aware, that the lanes are shifting out there pretty routinely, that the email that I got back from Metric is it'll stay on flash until it's ready to go into full service.
Okay. That lane has been shifted to the new section number 1. It's creating a slowdown. If you go out there 5 times a day, you'll see cars slowing down. It's ridiculous. 98 traffic is bad enough. If we can do something to speed it up. I was expecting you to say it was a bit dangerous intersection, not that all the other streets that intersect with 98 that don't have a light, but if they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it. All right. I also asked for an update, and we still haven't gotten the location of the Feline and Friends feeding stations. We still don't know where those are. I asked for that months ago, okay? I'd like to get the locations. Have we determined and did any follow-up to see if they're actually removing the food at night?
So what we did is we did work with Feline Friends months ago, and they did provide us a list of where the stations are, and then we also included in the contract that we would raise the stations when possible to basically get them out of the way of other predators or dogs or anything like that. And we have worked directly with Feline Friends in order to accomplish that.
But they're not emptying it like they're supposed to?
They are also, as part of the contract that we put in for the new fiscal year, is that the food is supposed to be removed by dark.
But we haven't verified that.
I have not, no, sir. We have not gone
And
out
could I
and
get the
physically
locations?
verified it.
I'd like to get the locations, because I don't mind driving by.
We can
and
get
taking
you
a
the
look.
map now. I know that we have that.
Okay. Dr. Ramswell talked about the money from the TDD for OCSO. I just want to, closing out the year, I want to make sure we stay on point of that. I don't want that to slip through the crack again. We talked about it, but again, just so we know that. Speaking of signs on the west side, my next comment is, what's the status of the welcome, our destined, the big billboard, the Eglin billboard, as far as that permission for trees on the coast? Do we have any idea what the update on that is?
Ms. Firth met with the members of the Air Force on property out there, and she may be able to give us the best update.
Yes, we met, and for the environmental study there, to make sure everything was okay. Everything came back good with Eglin. They wanted a new drawing, and to make sure that our guys could get up to the top of the signage with the planter that they're going to be putting up there, and everything seems to be okay. So that's been submitted, and we're just waiting for them to say okay and put the stamp on that.
Okay, thank you. Just trying to get update. We haven't heard about that in a long time. Moving right along, a couple more. The status of the body cams from code compliance.
On those, they're going to be real expensive. We're looking at the ones that we could probably get a little cheaper through Amazon. We'd have to build us our policies and procedures govern that. It's going to be costly if we go the route what the sheriff's office does, so we'd have to go with the Amazon if we're going to do this.
And it might be cost prohibitive. It was just something we talked about. We're just trying to get an update. Okay.
If we decide to this, I would like to test it with probably one officer, because there's a retention for our public records.
Okay.
Mr. Mitchell, can I interrupt?
Sure.
It's on that same line. Did y'all ever get all the printers in your vehicles?
Yes, ma'am. Once I get my new vehicles coming in, the two, then we'll be totally complete. We have our printers, our laptops, everything. We're ready to go.
Something.
Okay, a couple more. Lance, have we determined yet how much money we're owed back from APT?
I spoke with Mr. Farmer about that today. We believe that it is less than $1,500 that they could possibly owe us. I can't swear that they owe it to us, but it looks like they up to $1,500.
On that one, okay. I want to just clarify a couple of things as we close out this year. I want everybody to understand, with these contracts that I spoke about, it's not the dollar value that we're talking about. I'll put it in a couple of other references. We're real bullish, if you will, on trees, and we don't want anybody to cut trees down without permits. So if all of a sudden a city employee started cutting trees down, we'd obviously be ranting and raving up here because the process didn't work, okay? So it's the same thing. I don't care if it's 5 cents or $50,000, the processes are broken. We saw that earlier tonight when we talked about the street sweeper. It's not the dollar value that matters. For our business owners up here, how many times a day would you pay an invoice for items you billed for and not get it? So again, it's the processes we're talking about. I've had a lot of feedback from a lot of people. Obviously, I'm grandstanding, I'm that. It's not the dollar value. I keep talking about the sins of the past. Well, some of the sins of the past are still with us. We haven't cleaned it up. And it's quite obvious we have some broken processes that we're working to fix. And that's what I'm looking to do. We talked about the fire department contract tonight. We saw flaws in that where we don't know about that. The Feline and Friends, we don't know about that. We enter into these contracts in good faith, assuming people are going to do what they do, and we've proven time and time again they're not. Now, let me be clear about one thing. Everybody, every company we deal with, and every continuing service contract's not bad, okay? These are just some of the ones we've identified. And last meeting, when we talked about the Florida pest control and in buildings that we shouldn't be doing it, and we said, well, we've done it like that for years. That's ridiculous to make that comment, okay? Oh, it's only $900. That's still taxpayers' dollars, and we're supposed to be good stewards of that. So again, in clarification, I'm not worried about the dollar value. I'm worried about the contracts. I talked to the attorney about this, and we can't do this right. In the last meeting, I incorrectly voted, and I'm not going to change it, but I just want to go on the record. Regarding the Florida pest control contract, I voted yes, and in effect, I wanted to vote no on that. So it's just on the record that we're not going to go back and change anything. I just wanted to be on the record. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. We all need to roll up our sleeves and work hard next year and get this thing going even better than it is now. The other thing I want to do is make a special thanks and give all the best wishes to all the men and women in uniform, be it local law enforcement, be it our military and our first responders. They're the reason we're all sitting here and we're all safe. So Merry Christmas and thanks to all of them. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Overdeer.
Ditto on the Christmas parade. It was wonderful. You did a great job. The candy was just perfect because when I got to Stallman, I had 4 pieces of candy left, so that was just the right amount. And ditto on Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's. And that's all I have.
Mr. Marlar.
Thank you. Same with on the parade. As a matter of fact, my designated driver called out, got the city pickup truck, and I sat on the back on the toolbox and kept throwing out candy, and I made it to the end of the parade. And it's amazing that even though I was behind everybody else, I still made it back before Santa left the parking lot at Pepito's, and managed to catch up with Santa at where my low-speed vehicle broke down, and got to see the Sweet Sweeper in action. It worked very good. I watched them do a lot of work on that on the street, so I like that. I have a couple little items. The first one that's printed is the ordinance establishing a short-term rental construction for the constructed for the future must comply with the commercial building code. I talked with Mrs. Kopp about that, and she has been so nice to work on something of that nature. I do this because I feel that the city is just as much responsible for some of our short-term rental problems, because we do not have a real definition of what is a single-family residential home, whether, how many bedrooms does a single family need. So that was one of the reasons, and I'll turn this part over to Ms. Kopp and let her explain what we're going to try to do.
Okay, so we are going to right now request direction from the City Council to direct staff to draft an ordinance establishing that single-family dwellings that are used as short-term rentals comply with the Florida Building Code for commercial buildings if they are used as a short-term rental. And the reason for that is we want to include certain safety features that are required for public transient lodging facilities, such as sprinkling. In case of a fire, people are protected and things of that nature. If you have detailed questions, we can talk to the building official who supports this idea. But other than that, it's just general direction, and we'd bring an ordinance back to you for consideration. And also, this would apply going forward, not retroactive.
Would you like that in a motion form, giving you the direction?
Yes.
Or consensus?
Go ahead.
It's his floor, so I'll second whatever you'd
Well,
like.
I'll make a motion that we go ahead and get the ordinance prepared for first reading and whatever staff needs to do.
Second. I have one quick question. We're saying all short-term rentals, right? If you're going to use it as short-term rental, we're not going to say 25 and after. We're
No,
going to say all.
All single-family dwellings, not
Yeah.
condos.
Gotcha.
All single.
Will there be a stipulation on amount of bedrooms or anything like that, Ms. Kopp, or is all going to mean all?
It means all if they're used as a short-term rental.
How would you
Mr.
enforce it?
On the front end. How do we?
Don't get permitted unless they meet the commercial code.
But I mean, I would just, yeah, but,
What if the Osmond family says, no, this is going to be for my...
so if somebody, after this passes, somebody builds a house next year, lives in it for 2 years, and then decides...
We have a change of use ordinance in place now, so then they'd be brought under that ordinance and have to go through the same process via that ordinance. We have it covered based on the new ordinances you all have passed.
Mr. Braden, you got a question?
Yeah, I had a question about along the same lines. Will that be if they, I guess if a home's being built in an area that can be short-term rental, that it'll have to be, they can't change it to a short-term rental 12 months after CO?
Right,
So
so-
somebody can't come in and say, well, I'm just building my regular home, get it CO'd, and then change it to a short-term rental just because it's going to be expensive to...
Correct.
sprinkle.
Well, if they change the use, then they would have to comply with the commercial code, and
Bring
so
it
it would behoove them to prepare their initial application correctly and only have to go through the process once.
Thank you.
Yeah, if we don't do that, they'll game us. We all know that. So what about, I would think that if we do pass this ordinance or some form of it, that we'd want to have like a disclaimer when people come in to build in an area that allows short-term rental, to kind of let them know that you're going to have a change of use, and it'll be way more expensive to do it. So if you're even a little bit thinking about using it or selling it as an STR, you need to pay it up front.
Yeah, and I would put this on the application when they initially come in, besides the fact that if they actually meet with staff and have a pre-application meeting or talk to staff at all, they would be informed.
That's just a courtesy to anyone.
Yes.
Especially if you're going to play hardball like that, so.
Well, it will be in the code, so.
Sure. All right, anything else, Mr. Marlar?
We got to vote first on this.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion, we have a second. Ayes have it, so moved. Anything else?
Yes. Once upon a time, when we were a young city, we had Christmas decorations on Highway 98. Somehow they disappeared, and we never got any back. It seems kind of strange that we have the parade on Highway 98, but we don't have any decorations on 98. I would like, no, well, actually, I actually asked this many years ago before Miss Harberger got involved, but she and I had a talk about it, and as a matter of fact, one year I was working for one of our continuing services contractor, and we hung the decorations that particular year. We actually acquired them from the city of Fort Walton Beach. They had changed theirs, and we'd gotten their old ones, although they were in fairly good, decent condition. I don't know what happened to those decorations, but there are several companies out there now, and I gave a card to the city manager or somebody on city staff last year, and I will try to get the most current one that I had talked to a couple of weeks ago to get in contact with us. There are several contractors that will help put them up, help us purchase them, and then store them for us, and then they put them up each year for us. And with council's consensus, I'd like to have that explored so that possibly next Christmas, even though I won't be in the parade, as a member of council, that maybe by next Christmas we'll have some decorations on Highway 98. If the council so would give their approval to let staff explore that.
I think that's a great idea, and I believe at Visioning a few years ago, we talked about putting Christmas decorations on the power poles, and nothing ever kind of came from that, but we all liked the idea, just nothing ever happened. So I love it.
That's exactly where I had put them the year that I helped put the ones out with the continuing service contract. I'm not really sure, but the Gulf Power might have been one to tell us we couldn't do it, but I think we can work that out.
Yeah, they've recently said that they were okay with it because we talked about expanding the Main Street art banner project, and Gulf Power had said that they thought that that was fine. They just didn't want it to interfere with the lighting or whatever. I mean, of course, we need to clarify, but.
So
yeah.
does council approve of me having staff look into that, please?
Yeah.
Yep, everybody nod their head.
I think it's awesome. I thought he made the same statement about this time last year,
I did.
and nothing ever happened.
I think we fired everybody. That might have something to do with it.
Quite possible we did.
So
We didn't
hopefully
get
we'll
Christmas
keep these
decorations.
wonderful people around and we can get some Christmas lights up on 98 next year. Is that all, sir?
That's all for me, Mayor.
Mr. Daston.
Thanks. I'll be as brief and as quick as I can. Just to give you guys a brief Gulf Power update, we sat down, our staff, engineers, sat down with Gulf Power's engineers this morning and just delved into what it may take to try to get a feasible and reliable and accurate cost estimate for the phases that we intend to go through and implement for undergrounding. And to that extent, it has come time that we need to send out an RFQ for a project management services. And I'd like the council's approval to send that out on the street because our point in-house at staff right now is our city engineer, John, but John's drinking water from a fire hose, so to speak, and we're going to need the dedicated expertise of folks to get this moving forward so that we can stitch up our undergrounding plan, our undergrounding agreement, and the franchise agreement, hopefully within the next 6 months. So this is just a part of the process. So to that end, I'll put a motion on the floor to instruct staff to send out an RFQ for the Gulf Power Project Management position.
Second.
I got a motion, I got a second. Only question I have for you, we've already set up our budget for 2020. Could some of this be funded through the franchise agreement?
Well, the franchise.
Or will we have to have Bragg do some magic and find
I'm
us-
assuming Bragg's going to have to do some amending to get this done, because we're going to have to pay somebody immediately. The franchise fees that could fund this that's just not going to be done until we sign a new franchise agreement, which hopefully we can get, like I said, I'm shooting for middle of 2020. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do want to talk about funding sources. That's my other point, but we'll do that right after this vote.
Okay, we got a motion, got a second for this position, so crucially needed. Any further discussion? Seeing none? You got it. Votes unanimous, so moved. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. The other item is that I would like Bragg and whomever else within staff is going to be pertinent to bring us back potential financing sources, that we can have a little bit of a robust discussion at the next meeting and future meetings with regards to how we intend to fund the undergrounding project and how we could do it, either through financing, through bonding, through earmarking. There's a whole host of different ways. So I think everybody needs to see the panoply of options, and then we can go from there. And to that end, if you like it in a motion form, we can put it in a motion form, but if you're good enough, just bring it back to us at the next meeting. Okay, so we don't need a vote. That sounds good enough. Other than that, Merry Christmas. Thank you to staff. It was a wonderful parade.
Mr. Morgan.
Yep, thank you, staff. The parade's wonderful. I think it's one of the best things we do as a city. And as a city council member, it's really nice to have one day of the year where the entire public is generally happy to see you. So that's great. Might have something to do with my
Till your
candy
candy
selection.
runs out.
Yeah, no, it didn't run out this year. So my candy selection has improved over the past 4 years. I'm very proud of myself. Thank you.
One thing beyond a shadow of a doubt is don't waste any city money on peppermints. All right. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I have nothing to say, which is strikingly incredible to believe, but
Uncharacteristic.
totally uncharacteristic. Ms. Kopp.
Thank you. The first item I have is to request authorization from the City Council to allow me to work with the lawyers for Point Mezzanine to select a third-party mediator that's acceptable to both the city and Point Mezzanine to look at the two lawsuits with the main focus on the land use issues. We may decide to abate the public records lawsuit so that we can focus on the land use issues for a while, but we would do that in the context of mediation. The mediation request is actually coming from Point Mezzanine, so I did agree to request it from the City Council. Also, if anything does come to fruition from that mediation, it is not binding on the council, and we would take it back to you for approval or
You
disapproval.
need a motion or just consensus?
Motion would be the best.
Motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
So we got a motion by Mr. Mitchell, a second by Mr. Braden.
Mr. Mayor, I will be abstaining from the vote.
Okay. Rodney, was that what you were going to do, is make a motion? I got you on the list, or do you have a comment also? Oh, okay, before we leave? All right. We got a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none? Ayes have it with one abstain. You got
Thank
it.
you.
My
And-
abstention, I'm sorry, my abstention is because I'm employed by a member of the Point Mezzanine people for another project.
Okay. The second and final item I have is to request direction from you all with regard to whether staff should prepare an ordinance allowing accessory dwelling units as a subordinate use to the principal dwelling in a residential zoning district. That has the council had previously directed us to look into the issue and see if it was feasible. So the information we have to bring back to you is that generally, and these things are usually like mother-in-law suites, that's what we mean by accessory dwelling unit. It is reasonable to allow them in residential zoning districts. I would say the downside and the reason that the city prohibited them in the first place was the concern that they would be used for short-term rentals and Airbnbs. So this is a policy decision for you all. I'm not going to try to make. You let us know if you'd like us to do the ordinance to allow them in residential or not.
Could you just allow them in, could you not allow them in areas south of 98, short-term rentals only? The neighborhoods where we have short-term rentals? And the neighborhoods we don't have short-term rentals allow them because the concern is...
Right, that's right. If they are allowed now, we wouldn't be able to prohibit them without running afoul of the statute.
At the same time, you got people with big houses and big lots, and they call mother-in-law suites because after grandpa passes away, they build them so they can bring their moms to help care for them. So, and they're all over the city now in residential areas. They're in my neighborhood as well.
Yeah, we do have them existing, and there will have to be some code enforcement action taken on various properties if we don't amend the code.
And so you just want to amend the code for a specific policy that will dictate what can and cannot be done with these existing or any subsequent permit applications for new ones, correct?
I just want a policy decision from the council that says whether or not you want accessory dwelling units to be permitted or prohibited in low-density residential, which is basically the zoning in the western Old Destin part of the city, most of it.
What's the lot, what are the lot, I know they're already there, but is it, what are the lot size maximums for LDR?
I'm not sure. She's gone.
Planning staff left. I can get back to you on it. I don't have the lot size dimensions memorized.
This needs to be well discussed, I think. So let's go ahead and prepare language for us to consider. Is that good? So we can think it.
Okay, so we'll prepare something and just take it back to you for discussion, not for first reading.
How
If that
about
works.
You all good with that? Because we need to talk this one over. I'm just thinking about my next door neighbor in this particular case. Okay, is that good? Is it good direction? That's all you need? Anything else?
Thank you. Nope.
Mr. Bowman?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Braden, before I hit the gavel, you said you needed one more.
We have
minute.
public.
Well, right.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask everybody to keep their fingers crossed tomorrow. I am going to attend the county commissioners meeting and hope to see our money approved for Royal Melville Heritage Park.
Thanks, sir. Fingers crossed. Last opportunity for public comment before we hit the gavel. Sir, come on up. Remind you, you have 3 minutes. Hit the red button, state your name and where you live, as if you haven't ever been here before.
Hi, my name is Casey Jones, 3830 Indian Trail. I'm here, I would like to recognize Lewis's team, Joey and them. They've done an amazing job with the Harbor CRA. I sit on the Harbor CRA and the Harbor Waterways Board, and I just wanted to recognize them. I've been on the board for 4 years now or so, maybe longer. And from where we began to where we are now, it's just an amazing transformation. And I just want to recognize how awesome they are. You have a great team. Give us what you want us to do, and we'll get it done for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey, for the kind words. Anyone else? Seeing no mad rush to the podium, I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Merry Christmas.